Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural episode of Between Two Heads. My name is Jameson, Welbourn. I'm joined by my co-host, Addison, Demoura, a.k.a. Terpova. We have a very special episode today. We're joined by somebody who needs no introduction. Please join me in welcoming Marcus Bubbleman Richardson to the show. Marcus, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, guys. Nice and early on a Sunday morning here. Just had a nice big fat dab with some strawberry guava, and I'm ready to go.
Absolutely. We got to start early because we got a lot to go through, man. So I wanted to
let's do it.
Absolutely. You're doing some incredibly exciting stuff in the Canadian space right now, and you know have a long history in hash. But before we get into that, I want to start things before the hash. You know, I know you grew up in Winnipeg. I know hockey was a big part of your life. Talk to us a little bit about what it was like growing up in that era, pre your exposure to cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. You know, well, this is always my memory too. And the more I tell the stories as I get older, the more I wonder, especially with my father being gone, if they're accurate to what actually happened, or if there's some, recreation of my mind from just how I perceived it as I was younger. But my father taught me how to skate at a very early age. There's not much else to do, in cold Manitoba, 8-month winters. Which it's still winter there right now. They're still in they have feet of snow there. But just being able to learn how to skate at a very early age, both forwards and backwards. I think I was probably 3 or 4 years old when I could skate backwards, almost as fast as I could skate forwards. When I got put into community club hockey, for a while, it was like I could just skate around the kids and then score a goal. It was obviously not very fair. The level that I was at was at a higher level, but they based it on age, not level. And so as the years went on, then I tried out for, the tier hockey, the hockey that's now, this isn't, you just got put into a community club. You have to earn a spot on this particular team. And so that was the Royals and the Marauders. So this is really taking me back right now. It's kind of trippy, actually. And I was never good enough to make the Royals, the tier 1 team. I did make the tier 2 team, which was also really high level hockey. And, it's amazing to be so dominating when you're super young, because you could skate, that much better than the rest of the kids. And then to be humbled out and be kind of the middle of the row player. Because I really thought I was a great hockey player. I took it super serious. I played it 6-7 times a week. I skated 7 days a week, no doubt. I loved skating. I also went to the Montreal Canadian Hockey School, where Guy Lafleur and Bob Gainey, RIP to Guy Lafleur, an absolute legend Canadian hockey player who just passed away recently. He was a Montreal Canadian, and kind of a childhood hero, to be able to go as a young boy and skate with my heroes on the ice. And that dude never wore a helmet, and you never knew it from the TV, but he also chain smoked cigarettes, in every aspect, everywhere he was on the ice, it was just ridiculous. It was almost like a Saturday Night Live skit, this motherfucker with his cigarettes. All of that was very serious to me. Hockey was an incredible part of my life now, and I think I played it. I played tier 2 consistently, I guess, till I was 11, 12, 13, 14. I think 4 years I played with it. So for the most part, when you play a sport like that you earn your spot on a team, the team does change from year to year, but really the core group stays the same. And those people become very close friends. Very, very close friends. I mean, that's your fucking team.
Absolutely.
So I learned about that at a really young age. Go ahead.
I think it was one of your teammates you actually shared your first experience with cannabis with. Is that true?
That's 100% true. You're pretty. You've been fucking paying attention, Jameson. It's freaking me out a little bit. Yeah, it was. And Steve was there. Gosh, I want to say from the beginning, from 11 to 14 or 15, whatever year I got cut. I can't remember who else got cut, but I got cut one year and I was devastated. It was probably a defining moment in my life that was going to decide what failure did to me in my life, you know, because it was kind of like my whole life was defined as I'm a marauder, I'm a hockey player, these are my boys. You get cut from the team, and those are really not your boys anymore. Like, it was a very sort of shocking kind of like, okay, yeah, sure, you could, you know, give them a call or bump into them or whatever, but they're on another, they're on this specific pathway that if you're not on, you're really not on. So I remember, you know, years and years ago, my wife and her friends called him Stephen Gorgeous. And I don't know if that really because he was gorgeous or if there was some teenage, you know, sarcasm in there or whatever. But that's what they called Stephen Gorgeous. His dad was a CFL ref. I remember we'd see his dad on TV all the time, reffing, you know, the Bombers against the Rough Riders or whatever. And he was a good friend, and he definitely was like, and our hockey team was full of Joe Stradies. Like, nobody at 14 years old, when we hit that split, he was just like, hey, I got like I remember him saying, I have a joint, and me being like, oh, like, what's that all about? And people always ask me, well, what was that like? And I always completely like compare it to, you know, Dave Chappelle in Half Baked when they smoked their first joint, and they're all like, Abba Zaba, you my only friend. Like that shit, that whole scene of them walking into the fucking store, like that was just very similar to the experience. So that was kind of what was pulling us out of this very Joe Strady hockey perspective into this more alternative kind of like punk rock shows at the Albert or whatever.
So would you say that cannabis and that experience sort of started pulling you away from your previous interests that you were focused on and evolving you into the next chapter? Was that a clear evolution into the next chapter for Marcus?
I mean, of course. I met my wife like a year and a half later, so that was really also like between cannabis and my wife. I met them within a year and a half of one another, and they were going to be strong forces in my life. I've been with both of them ever since.
Absolutely. So you connected with a gentleman by the name of Martin at around that young age, and I'd love you to share that story because I think that springboards into a lot of really important work that you did.
Yeah, you know, I'm trying to think back now to whether I met Ron first or Martin first, but Martin, yes. So, and even when I try to think of how I met Martin, the exact moment in time. Now, he owned a store in Winnipeg called Los Manos, and that's the hands, and it was all handmade stuff from his travels, and he had been traveling in like Ecuador and Bolivia and like all these really cool places, Guatemala, where he was purchasing, cool materials and indigenous patterned clothing and stuff. And the type of store that would have incense and kind of cool carved bowls and shit from Africa. He had one of those shops. Him and his wife, Tara, had one of those shops. And this was before he had a child. And he's had 8 of them since. So he's got a lot of kids. He's got a big family. Yeah, it's shocking. It's amazing. They're all amazing, really. It's quite an amazing family. But yeah, I just kind of, Martin, I was all into the Dead and looking for more of that culture in my own city. And Martin, had his freak flag flying pretty high. So I must have eventually just gone into his store and introduced myself. I'm not exactly sure how we all met, but we all did start working together very soon after. He had a guy working at his store named John Gio, who would be one of our partners. His brother-in-law, Tara's brother, Neil Chippendale, who was an incredible guitarist, very Jerry-esque, had a bunch of cool hippie bands over the years, and we'd go get all baked and watch Neil hammer it out on the guitar. Really talented. I mean, honestly, ridiculously talented. And that was our little scene, and then years later, not years later, but maybe 1 or 2 years later, Alex, the final partner, would come into play. And how that all happened was Alex is very similar to Martin. He's traveling Asia. He's buying cool things. He's having things made. He's bringing them back to these cool little shops and these cool little sort of hipster type malls. In Winnipeg, there's one called the Forks. And it's very just cool little eclectic shops. And if you guys were in Winnipeg, you'd for sure end up at the Forks if you were there for any amount of time. So I guess his sister was running his booth. He was traveling. And she had some cool Dead paraphernalia, like these really cool patch shirts that were Grateful Dead shirts. And basically, I wanted to get some. My wife was like, oh, I'll maybe get you one for your birthday. I told her about it. So she went back and she was looking at all the shirts. And I guess the Dead ones at that point were gone. And so she didn't see any one that she wanted. So she was about to walk away. And the girl working the counter was like, hey, wait a second. You know, my brother told me for certain people to show him these ones that are under the counter. And he had some that were psychedelic mushrooms, really cool Semolinsciata mushrooms in a round patch, hand embroidered. These were from Nepal. And so my wife bought it for me. And she gave it to me for my birthday. And I took it from Winnipeg to British Columbia to go see, I think it was a Neil Young concert that was going on in Vancouver. I wore that shirt, and Alex, who had that shirt made in Nepal, had it designed in Montreal, had it sold in Winnipeg, couldn't fucking believe he was seeing it walking around in Vancouver. So he stopped me. First he chased me because I walk really fast. He's like, holy fuck, man, you walk fast. And he's like, catches me, and we end up smoking some charas from Nepal. And he tells me that, yeah, that's his shirt, dude. Like, I had that shirt made. Where the fuck did you get that shirt? And I told him the story, and I ended up introducing him to Martin. And he actually became one of the founding partners, both of him and Martin, in Manitoba Harvest.
Beautiful. I mean, that's a really interesting segue, because I think, you know, not listening to other interviews and pieces of media that you put out, Martin really set you on a path that ultimately opened up your mind and led you to activism in the root of the hemp exchange. So, I mean, if you could share a little bit about that, I think our listeners would be really interested in hearing that story.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, Martin was like a really cool, like super open-minded. He was reading Robert Anton Wilson, and we got into all that conspiracy shit together, David Icke, and just gobbling it up and fucking eating lots of mushrooms and smoking lots of hash and herb, and just like really just was like a mentor to me. Like, I looked up to him a lot. I was like, yeah, man, me and this guy, like, we take 5 grams of mushrooms each in a cold, dark room, like Terrence McKenna style, with like, not a cold, dark room, but just a very dark room. And we had these very intense experiences together. Those talks would not just be wasted stoner talk. We were like, let's change the world. Like, this is what we need to do. And we were discovering things like Jack's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and just having our own hemp discoveries in Manitoba. And somehow we all decided that, yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're going to become hemp activists, and we're going to get hemp growing legally in our province. And that was just one night we were having conversations that we decided that's what we were going to do. And it was like 9 months later that we planted the first hemp field in Manitoba in over 73 years. That shit was nuts. Dope. That was like 95. We applied in 94. Okay. We got it for 95.
And you actually sourced the seeds and then used money that you were given from a car accident to purchase those seeds for that field. Can you talk about the complexity in identifying what you were going to grow and how you went about that?
Yeah, so that was really more the rest of the team than me. The money part, I definitely bought those first 4 tons of Zolotenosia that we into the province. That's 100%. But finding the seed was the 94 Cannabis Cup. I didn't go to the 94. I went to the 95. That was my first. But my partners, Martin and John, and I'm not sure if Alex was there. I don't know if I brought him in yet. Yeah, because it was 93. So Alex probably would have been there too. Anyway, they went to the Cannabis Cup. They met this guy by the name of John Stahl, who was an expat American living in the Ukraine. And he was living with, he knew Borodko from the Institute of Bast Fibers, and he knew all these Ukrainian farmers who had been growing hemp for a very long time, but were also, you know, hurting monetarily wise and really couldn't afford to put gas in their tractor. So he was trying to drum up business. He thought the Cannabis Cup was something totally different than what it was. He was mildly bummed out, but he met my partners in Amsterdam, and they were like, we're from Manitoba. We've got millions of acres of land there that can be planted. Like, let's do this. And John's whole trip was that the Zola Tenosha was the lowest THC plant, like around. There was nothing. It was like 0.03% on a bad day. So it was just, it was like 10 times. You could legitimately make concentrates if you took that Zola Tenosha, and I mean, at least under these silly laws that you have to stay under 0.3%, but you could concentrate it by like 8 or 9 times, and it wouldn't be hot. So that's pretty crazy. But it also didn't produce a lot of cannabinoids. But John Stahl was representing Zola Tenosha and Borodko, the breeder who created it. He would just pull the plants right in the field. So he did that for so many decades. He reduced the THCA by like a drastic amount. So yeah, that whole thing was a huge inspiration. You know, bringing all that seed in, kept approaching our ministers of agriculture and of finance and saying, this is going to be a good thing for Manitoba. This is going to bring jobs. This is like a profitable thing. They were like, yeah, they couldn't, we kind of, with the help of Jack, and what he armed us with his book, all that information, arming us with exactly what we needed, we were able to just checkmate them and get that experimental license. Now, the experimental licenses lasted for 94, 95, 96, 97. And that's when companies started dehulling seed and selling hemp seed oil and all that sort of stuff. That was the year, I'm guessing, Manitoba Harvest was founded.
So before we move forward, I think we need to take a step backward, and you know, any interview with you would be remiss without talking about your connection with Ron Hickey.
Yeah.
And so I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about Ron and the connection you had with him, and how that relationship came about.
Yeah, I mean, Ron was just sort of an infamous character in our city, in the cannabis world, but really in all the worlds, because the way cannabis ran, because it was a sort of prohibited thing, it snaked through all prohibitive things in Manitoba. And so Ron was kind of at the epicenter of it all, because he was so obsessive compulsive and so like into learning, but also teaching. You know, Ron did, I want to say 6.5 years in Stony Mountain Penitentiary before I met him. He got caught with quite a bit. I think it was somewhere between 600 and 800 pounds, but there was also DEA from the US that were coming up to be at his trial and actively watching his trial. So they were concerned with him for certain. They gave him 6.5 years just for growing cannabis, which was pretty fucking crazy if you ask me. I met Ron, you know, a few years after that was like in the 80s. He would know the exact dates. I met him probably early 90s, if not late 80s. So he was probably just out for a while. I was growing psychedelic mushrooms. The psychedelic mushrooms were going good. We were having a bit of trouble with cannabis, and everyone knew that this guy, Ron, who just got out, had opened a hydroponic store, and you could go there and talk to him about anything, because the other guy who opened the other hydroponic store, if you talk about anything other than tomatoes, he'll kick you out for life. And so these were these two polar opposites in our Bible Belt city. And I was like, I'm going to go see Ron. And I'm like 17 or 18. And I go to this dude's hydro store, and I'm like, listen, you know, my tomatoes are not looking good. And he's like, listen, let's just cut this shit. I know you're not growing tomatoes. Let's go down to my basement. The next thing you know, we're like dabbing oil, like no joke. He's dabbing back then oil, just like smashing this cherry and honey oil. I'm just like, whoa, I'm so blasted. He's like, all right, listen, you tell me what's going on. In fact, better yet, why don't we get in my car right now and go see your plants? We'll get these plants feel better. And he was like the doctor, dude. He came, even times when I was like over the course of the next 6 months or a year, I'd be going on fish tour or to Amsterdam or Jamaica or something, and my wife would be caring for the plants and be like, "Oh, something's wrong." I'm like, "Go see Ron," and she'd go see Ron, and we just became really close with Ron because he was in our house so quick in an environment where nobody comes in your house when you grow weed in Manitoba in like 1991 or whatever. Like, it just doesn't happen. And so that was pretty trippy to just kind of be like, okay, I'm just gonna, you know what? I'm gonna trust this guy. Like, he was so fucking cool. I cannot tell you how cool this man was. He was like putting yourself in the middle of a Quentin Tarantino movie. Like, Ron was just a tornado that happened, and every group kind of got sucked into it and blown out at different times. And the stories that man could tell. In fact, I really do implore you, you guys should probably, if Ron was willing to do it, you should probably get Ron on to tell some of his own stories, because
100%.
Dude, I'm telling you, I think they're way crazier than any of my stories. Like, way crazier. I could not compete with Ron's stories.
Are there any specific stories that jump out in your mind that you could share with us?
Just like random shit, like he started ostrich breeding in Canada, you know, like he did the quarantine in London and brought this thing over. He was like, it was just a money idea he had, and all his partners, he jumped out at the last minute. He's like, actually, I don't like this. And, you know, the next 6 months or whatever, all his partners became multimillionaires off this concept and idea. He had a horse that he was grooming for the mob down in Kentucky, and this horse broke its leg, and they were like, you know, go put it down. And he was like, please, like, I don't want to put it down. And they were like, well, it's got a broken leg, it can't race anymore. He's like, I'll do anything. And then Ron style, he took care of this fucking horse with like a blow dryer and heat pads and massaging it for 18 hours a day. Like, this is the madness of Ron. You can't possibly fucking fathom. No other human being could have done this. So he cares for this horse for God knows how long. The horse with the broken leg that's never going to race again. And he gets this thing looking pretty good. And then he gets it looking really good. And then people are like, holy fuck, like, that horse is unbelievable. And he trades it for like 1,000 Quaaludes. And it goes to Toronto and it breaks the track record on its first race. The horse's name is Bold Revenue. And it becomes $1 million horse, like in one race. The horse with the broken leg that beat the track record on its first race at the Toronto race course. So Ron was also friends with one of the most famous jockeys in the world, this Canadian guy. I think his name was Todd. Real little short guy. He's won every World Cup, met the Queen, like won like $200 or $300 million in purse money racing horses. That's Ron's guy. And I could go on and on and on. Ron is at another fucking level of baller and insanity.
What's crazy though is that in some ways you are my Ron, which is just kind of fun.
Dude, and I got to share. Listen, I was so young when I met Ron. Like I said, I could have been 17 or 18. I probably looked 11. He was going to teach me everything about all this stuff. And now he was taking me to all these people's grows in Winnipeg, gnarly, angry, criminal type people that like didn't want me in their grows. And some were amazing and awesome and nice people, but Ron knew everyone and he wanted to set everyone up and help everyone and be helpful. And so now I'm visiting all of these grows and it's kind of like, okay, this is, you know, why is this kid here? Like, what are you doing, Ron? But Ron was in charge.
That's so awesome. I mean, to get that exposure and see all those different setups as a young kid, I think would be so valuable. Just like, and I know your brain and you know how quickly you can absorb information. So, you know, just being able to walk through these grow rooms must have been a really cool experience at that age.
It was priceless. And you know, those are, you know, Ron showed me a lot. I will say that. And he's always been a great friend. I wish he lived closer. But the years that I did have where I was very close with Ron were amazing, awesome years. The shit was so funny. I'll never forget making oil with Ron. And he was like, hey, do you want to make some oil? And I'm like, I guess maybe. Like, what solvent do you have? And he's like, oh, it's it's chloroform. And I'm like, chloroform, like the knock you out drug? He's like, yeah. He's got a 5-gallon bucket full of chloroform. And he's like, oh yeah, apparently, I don't know, my friend told me something about the polarity, but it works really well. And so he soaks this material in chloroform. It's blowing the solvent out the window with a little fan on a little heat pad. And at one point in time, some new people show up at the house and they're like, hey man, there's a dead squirrel outside your house. And Ron's like, oh no. And he's all freaking out that he killed this squirrel. And so he picks it up with a shovel and he brings it in the house. And he's kind of running around trying to figure out what to do. We kind of space it. We're feeling bad for a while. We forget. We smoke more of this oil, which is absolutely just insane. Winnipeg hick fucking chloroform oil. And the fucking squirrel starts moving its little hand. It starts like shaking its hand. And someone's like, I think I saw the squirrel move. And it's just moving its hand. And then it's kind of like shaking its head. And then it's like kind of doing this with its feet. And then it just jumped up and fucking started like tearing around Ron's house, dude. And this is not a chipmunk, by the way. This is an actual squirrel. Like, they're big. They have the big bushy tails, little opposable thumbs. They're kind of gnarly creatures. Like, you wouldn't want one climbing on you, I'll tell you that much, or
big.
biting you. Yeah, they're big. So that was just like another random afternoon with Ron. Like, that was anything could fucking happen, dude. Anything could happen when you were hanging out with Ron. That is what I will say.
Well, I know for sure that I'm starting a chloroform hash company right now, and
dude,
we're gonna change the world. Holy shit!
So, Marcus, you mentioned that 95 was your first Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that was like for you?
Yeah, that was great. I mean, that was the year that I met Marble Slinger, even though I didn't know. I only knew him as Aaron. And we talked about, I knew him as a young kid that grew up in Ithaca and Rhode Island, or just went to school for film school. But 95 was amazing, dude. It was the first time I ever went to Amsterdam. I went with my partners. I went with John and Martin, and, we stayed on Damstraat, and we, went to our first coffee shop and was like, holy shit. Like, you have to imagine in 95, it was very, very illegal in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Like, Ron had just done 6.5 years. He was our good friend. So we already knew someone that served like hard federal time with like really the worst, people who have done the worst crimes in the country. That's who Ron ended up doing time with. That's who he had to spend his time with. So, of course, Ron made the best of it, and he would have amazing amounts of prison stories and just kept people from getting stabbed, and smoked weed with everyone, and smuggled lobster into the prison with this dude from the Triads, and made special lobster dinners, and then got busted, and the paper found out about it, and then the Tonight Show found out about it, and they wanted to pay the paper to pay Ron $25,000 to use the story on the Tonight Show, but the paper wanted to keep all the money. So Ron was like, no, I'm not doing that. Just another day in prison for Ron. He did end up doing another 6 years. I don't know what the year was. Ron had a store. He was very open. He was just into helping everyone. Everyone knew it was like Ron was just very open. He was willing to help everyone. Well, a woman goes into the Ron store, and she claims that she has, I can't remember if it was her husband or her, that had like a really bad cancer and needed to find some cannabis so that she could make extracts or whatever. So Ron, being Ron, was like, of course, I'll find you cannabis. Like, how much cannabis do you need? And she's like, oh, I think over like a couple of months, maybe it was 5.5 pounds of herb. And in the end, she ended up being a informant whatever. And the reason was even crazier, which is, this is more Ron, right? If it was just the part that I said, oh, this woman pretended to have cancer, she tricked Ron into giving her pounds, and Ron got like 5 to 6 years for that. Federal time, again, in Stony Mountain Penitentiary. But the reason why she did it was because her double axe murderer husband had been in prison for all these years, and he wasn't allowed any yard time. It was for him to get 1 hour of yard time every week if they got Ron with a charge. And then Ron served his time with that guy, the double axe murderer, who would apologize to Ron in the fucking yard and be like, "Oh, Ron, like, I'm sorry, man." And Ron's just like, "Ah, don't worry about it, man. Like, it'll all work out." Unbelievable.
Something tells me that like prisons in Canada are actually like the Trailer Park Boys put it out to be. Like, is it the same way? Like you could, because it's just like that sounds like such a good story with love. You know, Canadians are just so loving and sweet, I think is what it is. Like Americans are fucking horrible human beings. So like
I think it's like a little column A, a little column B. Prisons can get pretty crazy in Canada for sure. So when you were there in Amsterdam, you actually shared or sat next to or shared a table with Ed Rosenthal. Is that correct?
Well, when we went in '95, it was all their second year going, and it was my first year going. So by that time, they knew we're not going to be like walking around people anymore. We're going to get a booth. So we had a booth at the Cannabis Cup. So anyone that went to the Cannabis Cup back in those days knows that it was at the PAX Party House. It was cool. It had a lot of stairs, and it was very like cramped and got very, very smoky and very, very hot as well. But it was like, that was the OG Cannabis Cup. And we were on the third floor, top floor. We had a booth. I didn't really know who was on either side of me. It did end up being Eagle Bill, the vaporizer dude, and Jack Harrer on the other side, which we were super stoked on, because at that point he was kind of like our leading, you know, like hero guy. Ed was a close second to Jack, just because the books helped us so much, really. And then we met Ron, and we didn't need the books anymore. But when we got to our booth the first time, I was actually by myself. When I got to my booth the first time and got told where it was just this little tiny table. A dude was sitting on it. And I was kind of like, "Oh, hey, man, like, I can't remember if I recognized him right away. I don't think I did for some reason." And I was like, "Oh, hey, man, that's my booth or whatever." And he's like, "Oh, well, then we have to smoke hash." And he had this tiny little pipe. He basically packed some really nice sift, not like Rob Clark, Skunkman Sam level sift, but it was nice. For me, '95, first time I would, you know, sort of had puffed this type of pollen. It was great. You know, he loaded it. I smoked hash with him, and he's like, "Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Ed Rosenthal." And I was like, "Oh shit, okay. Like, fuck, I know your name from High Times. I just didn't really recognize his face." I've been friends with Ed really ever since that day, and so that was kind of trippy. We were blown away when Jack came and sat down with his granddaughter, and we're like right next to us. And Jack's like the epicenter of the Cannabis Cup. So like Ben Dronkers and all the Sensi people are going to be hanging out with Jack, and like just everyone that knew anything about anything would go to his booth, and we were right next to him. And we had some hemp clothing that my partner had sourced out of Thailand. In the end, I'm not sure it was hemp clothing, but back then we certainly thought it was. And those were the days of, you know, like getting the best information and the best source that you could. It was like the Mama Indica hemp seed treats. Everyone was like, "These are amazing," and has all these essential amino acids. And then I'd be like, "Yeah, but you know, like those seeds are from China, and they're steam distilled till they're just dead and have nothing left in them to give in order for them to come into the country. And at that point, they're just like a shell of their former self, pun intended. Like no embryo, just like dried up nothing, just eating the husk." And that's what Mama Indica hemp seed treats were. As activists, we were willing to be like, "You know what? It's a foot in the door." You know what I mean? Like, it's a foot in the door.
Absolutely. So you come back from the cup, and you know what happens next?
Well, we were pretty inspired. We were definitely by then. Well, I mean, '95, we were already doing the hemp activism for some years now. You know, like 2 to 3 years we would have been in for the hemp activism. We would have had our store. the hemp exchange. I ended up traveling that year as well. That was the end of my year of travel, I believe, because it was November. So I don't think I went anywhere in December, and I think I did Jamaica earlier. I was living in Winnipeg, but in '95 I went to Jamaica, Amsterdam, and Vancouver, and that was like a kind of crazy trio that would become a really strong part of my life after. Because before that, I hadn't been to any of those places.
What was your first trip to Jamaica?
Funny enough, first trip to Jamaica was amazing. I ended up getting married to my beautiful wife, who I had been together with at that point for already 6 years. We just kind of like eloped and said, let's just get married on the sand right here. Like right now, this is fucking awesome. We stayed in a tent for all but one night, where we rented a hotel. We thought we were going to get married this one day, so we rented a hotel, but then it poured rain that day. So we were just like mildly bummed. But then the Jamaicans were like, no, it's super good luck. And they're really, superstitious folk. They're like, it's super good luck if it rains on your wedding day and you have to get married the next day. Like, that's really good luck. So we were like, fuck, okay. Like, I like the way these Jamaicans think. Like,
For
so
sure.
we just turned it into that and made it that and got married the next day. It was November 2nd. We were going to get married November 1st, November 2nd. I also took her out to Jamaica for her birthday. So that was October 23rd. So we were there for her birthday. We had never been anywhere really. I'm like, go take you to Jamaica and sleep in a tent. Like, no joke, on the 7 Mile beach. You couldn't do this today, by the way. But in '95, there was a couple of random empty lots left where this one guy, Eli, had let people put tents up. And I'll never forget, he had this dude, Cowboy, who was a Vietnam vet from America. And he was the security. And he had this big army tent. And he had a gun, and at night you'd hear him come out and start like screaming patois. It was amazing, dude. Really quite something.
That's so cool. And I know, you continued going back there, over the years and developed a lot of really cool relationships. But before we touch on that, I think in '96 you actually moved out to British Columbia. What prompted that move?
Well, okay, so I had moved out of my small house in the Wolseley area where we were growing the mushrooms and the herb, and I found a pretty nice house. That house was like $700. Well, we found one for like $1,300. I getting rid of the roommate, just me and the wife, moving into this nice fucking styly house, big ass bungalow, but a big basement. Basement was actually huge, like it's almost the size of the house. So Ron goes down there. He's like, listen, I know what to do here. We don't need to be greedy. I'm just going to cordon off a section of this basement. He gets his whole construction crew in. He builds a whole secret room in this basement. It's got like a door that you push under the staircase and it cracks open. The whole thing's all linoleum tilted to a drain. It's just like a full-blown grow room minus the lights. Actually, the lights were up too. And then my landlord was like, hey, we want to come and do a survey on the house because we're selling the house. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. I was like, Ron, we do a survey on the house. What do we do? He's like, oh, don't worry about it. Let's just take the lights all out. You've got those iguanas. Why don't we put some sand in the corner here? Put up a couple of trees, throw your iguanas down. It was like this huge fucking room when you walked in the secret door. And way in the back, there were these two little trees and these two little iguanas. It was so fucking obvious. So I got evicted. They were like, yeah, he split up the basement. Like when the guy was surveying, he was like, apparently half the basement is missing. And Ron's like, is it half? I mean, I thought it was more like a third. It was just so fucking, it was so comedy, dude. So anyway, it was a real bummer because that was going to be a nice, like 14 lighter in a nice neighborhood. Like everything about it was perfect. And so it was really Martin who was kind of like, dude, why don't you move out west? Like, why don't you pioneer, get out there for us? We'll be close behind you. And I was like, oh, yeah, you think so? Alex, he was already had 1 foot in British Columbia, 1 foot in Manitoba. And so I was out here on a trip. It would have been '96. I came to look at houses to move here. Based on Martin kind of like getting me all excited and jacked. And my wife also didn't really want to live in Manitoba. She loved the allure of West Coast. We were both very pulled by it. So it was kind of an easy decision. We were like, let's just go out there. I went out there looking for houses and it was bad. I mean, a perfect story about allow yourself to be yourself and allow yourself to manifest your proper experiences and recognize them, even though they may come at you as obstacles. So I go to this service in Vancouver, 96, to like a computer service, and they punch in all the data for the houses in the neighborhood that are for rent, all of the filters that would, but before this stuff really existed, on Craigslist, if you wanted to look for a house, you could put the filters of how many bathrooms and bedrooms and all these things. Well, this was kind of the predated version. And for $80, they would like go through their computer service, find all the houses that fit your specifications. So he sends me to these 3 and 4 bedroom houses in like Coquitlam and Mission and all these far around areas outside of Vancouver. And I'm just bummed out. They're not good. They're like basement suites and they're dingy. And I'm like, I have a whole house in Manitoba. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And so I go back. I've also got like long hair. I'm like reek like weed. I drive a Volkswagen van. I'm wearing a tie-dye Grateful Dead shirt, from Buffalo 77 or whatever. And Buddy's just like looking at me. He's like a suit. He's all super straight with his short hair. And he's like, I'm like, listen, dude, none of these are going to cut the butter. I need a beautiful home, man. I need something to be inspired by. I need something that at 3 a.m, if I want to scream at the top of my lungs, I won't affect anyone next door or above or below. Like, I need that. Do you have that? And he's looking at me. He's like, well, I might have something. And so he ends up telling me about a house that's not even a part of the company he works with. It's in fact his parents' house. And he says, why don't you go see it? And so the day that I'm here, I'm with Alex and I go see this house, you guys. And it's like, I can't even find the staircase or the house because it's so far down. And we pull up and it's like 73 stairs down to the ocean. And this house is just sitting right on the ocean and it's all glass and wood and epic. And I'm from Winnipeg and I'm just like, my heart's beating. I'm like, this can't be real. Like this, I would anything to live here. It's right out of a fucking movie, dude. It's like where Magnum PI would live. Like it's absolutely batshit crazy. And I end up renting it from his parents, who become like, they're good friends of ours, the Witzels. They were super nice people. They actually lost their daughter in an avalanche in Bolivia one year, and that prompted them to move out again. We moved in their house twice, lived for 6 years on the ocean, had 2 of our children born in that house, home birthed. It was amazing. That house was absolutely batshit crazy amazing. And Alex was with me. And before I even took the house, I didn't know that I could afford it. It was $2,100, and I was just getting used to paying $1,300 from $700. I had just doubled like less than 4 months prior. So I was like, oh, I don't know if I can double again. Like this is another level. So, Alex is kind of there, and he's like, you know what, dude, I'd rent a room for $800. And I'm thinking, oh fuck, if he rented a room for $800, then I'm back in this $1,400 kind of range, and I might be able to pull this off. And on that trip, Alex was like, no, I can't do it, dude. I can't rent a room from you. So I was all kind of like bummed, sitting on a beach with a friend of mine from Winnipeg, Lita. And Lita said, dude, of course you can do this. Just do it, man. Like you do everything you do, you succeed at. Just do it. Go do it. And it's like the very words I needed to hear. And I took it on. I moved out to BC and rented a $2,100 a month house with a $1,050 damage deposit. And I had $6,000 to my name when I moved to BC. And I never turned back, and I never went back. And I got a lot more than $6,000 now. It worked out good.
That's very cool. So how quickly, when you got to British Columbia, did you connect with Hillary Black and the BC Compassion?
Before we were the Manitoba hemp guys. We used to come out here, drive out to Hemp BC, see, not really Emery, because he was just kind of like operating that whole scene. We did rare time we might see him, but we would connect with his workers who were, there was Hillary, there was Shell, there was Jeremy, there was Dana. Dana kind of came a little bit later. Hillary was the angel. Shell and Jeremy became close friends down the years. I still know them well, and they're wonderful people. They were just quieter people, and Hillary was very extroverted. And Ron, we would bring the haze. And so we'd show up with these 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-week blooming hazes. Because of course, Ron, right? That was the other thing about Ron. It was like he turned me on to the haze. He's like, have you ever tried the haze? Oh, you got to try the haze, man. It's amazing. And it was like fucking methamphetamine or whatever. Like, especially for me and Ron, who were already bouncing off the walls, we're now smoking. Keep in mind, the first time I ever went with Ron on my like first mentorship with Ron, he brought me home. Okay, I went out with him at 5 p.m. and he brought me home at 10:30 a.m. the next day. That was just traveling around the city and visiting grows that he needed to fix things at. Like, so that was like a night out. Even my wife was just like, oh, I figured you'd be home at like 1 or 2 p.m. Because it did start getting later and later, where it would be like, dude, you've almost been gone for 24 hours. Like, what the fuck? It was good stuff.
Wild. That's awesome.
Yeah, reminiscing about Ron is awesome.
So when you went out there, you let Hillary know that you were coming out, and then, you know, how did
She was my only friend.
Yeah.
She was really my only friend out here. So, you know, basically coming out here, this was Todd McCormick was just starting to rent this mansion in Bel Air. And Hillary was kind of in love with him. I remember can't remember what year it was. It must have been like the 95 Cannabis Cup where Hillary was there. Yeah, she was working at Positronics for Wernard. And I think Todd was out there with his magazine, and they ended up moving back to California, but she's back to BC. And her whole thing was, should I move into this mansion in Bel Air with Todd, or should I stay in Canada? And I'm like, well, I'm fucking want you to stay in Canada. Like, I just moved here. You're the only person I know. You're a super cool chick, and you should do your own thing here. And she's like, well, maybe I'll start my own like dispensary, like, you know, like a club. And that was, I'll never forget, on my living room floor, her writing on a piece of paper the words she disliked, medical and marijuana, and the words she did like, compassionate and cannabis. And that became the BC Compassion Club. And yeah, I was one of their first growers. Me and Romulan Joe, we were their first growers. He grew the Romulan. I grew like the Dutch Treat and the NL4 or NL5. It was like the Closet Queen. It was really nice, tasty, you know, version of that ML crosses. So yeah, it was good times back in those days. You know, Hillary was doing something. It was being done in California. You know, like one of her big inspirations for sure was Valerie Corral. Valerie and Mike were doing all that really cool shit with Wham, and she was a big inspiration to Hillary. Todd was also inspired Hillary as well a great deal, and she just kind of came back with all this information like, I'm going to start my own, you know, BC Compassion Club. And our first clientele were the most vulnerable, destitute people. A lot were homeless, a lot were terminal, a lot had mental illness, and those were the people she chose to shine the light on first. And it was just awesome. I got to meet some really amazing people, and I got to feel like, you know, before that, I was just kind of like growing weed, balling, selling weed, flipping weed. And now all of a sudden, Hillary created this environment where I could be a part of philanthropy. And it was very easy. I always felt like this is nothing. Like, I don't deserve any credit for this at all. This is literally the least I could do, and I should fucking be doing more. But I would just give them herb, and it felt really good to do that. And, you know, even a lot of that herb that I gave them really was Hillary's goodwill, because she refused any type of black market, you know, fee. She never, any type of introduction. She'd introduce me to someone that I'd do, you know, like a massive amount of business with, and she wouldn't accept anything. So I was like, just give it to the club. Here, I'll give it to the club. And she would accept that. She's like, oh yeah, you can give the club whatever you want. So, you know, when I would get finally arrested in 1998 with 6.5 pounds and $6,000 cash at a roadblock, Hillary was there to, and the whole club was there to stand behind me, come to my court cases, and you know, so sort of show that it was an injustice, that I wasn't like flipping mad pounds to like high school kids, because at that point in time, I really was like, the best thing that I did was just for the club, and there just could never be profit. And really, you know, towards the middle and end, there just couldn't even be any money. I was just like, you know what, just take it. like Christmas time, it would be like multiple pounds, stuff like that. And Hillary did that. That was really all Hillary and her crew of people that she magnetically attracted to her, which there was a really good group of people, Jill back in the day, Van Thorpe and Marcel, who worked there. Kind of created this whole federal thing. Like the government used to go visit Hillary and look at her model and try and learn from it. And the club still to this day exists. She's a great person. I'm very glad she stayed when I moved here in '96. It was very important for her to be here and for me to be able to be a part of some of that work and grow this herb that I was growing, beautiful herb. Me and Romulan Joe would grow herb and then sell it to Hillary at a loss and then buy shittier herb for our own head because it just felt like the right thing to do. And that was 96, 97 really that started.
So 99 you get pulled over and you catch this case.
98.
How shortly after that did you meet Skunkman Sam?
Well, Skunkman Sam and my paths had crossed in 95. I saw him speak in Vancouver at the Hemp Something Expo thing. He spoke there and I knew who he was back then because Hillary in 95, I also met Rob Clark at the Cannabis Cup.
Yeah.
Didn't really know who he was, but kind of interacted with him.
That's something sorry to interrupt, Marcus. That's something I had highlighted to jump back to, but I'd love for you to share that story of connecting with Ron Clark in that restaurant as well. I think that's something.
Well, that one's 98. That's some years later, and he was at my house before that restaurant, so that I knew him by then actually, because I'm just trying to think. You get all the dates mixed up. There was a year, I think it was 96 or 97, that Hillary brought Rob to my house. It was Hillary who introduced me to Rob. He was a good friend of Hillary's. And so I had that house on the water and he came there. And so it was like, I looking back, I think now people must have been like, who the fuck is this fucking child living in this house on the water or whatever? Because I just looked very young. I was very young. In my like young 20s or whatever,
Yeah, absolutely.
Like just 20 years old type of thing. So, but yeah, I would meet Rob in that restaurant. I didn't have a lot of interactions with him really. And then with Sam, it was the bubble. I'd seen him speak. I may even introduce myself to him briefly, but he wanted nothing to do with me. But when I started the Bubble Bag company, Fresh Headies company, and it was Rob who said, if it don't bubble, it ain't worth the trouble. And he was saying it at my house and he was saying it in Amsterdam that's when I'll tell that story a little later. So when I first got made bubble, that's the saying I wanted to use as in my motto. And I did. And fucking Sam emailed me when he saw it. He saw some ad in a High Times or something somewhere. And he said, if it don't bubble, it ain't worth the trouble. Do you know who first said it? And I was like, oh, fuck, this is definitely Skunkman Sam. So I wrote back very humbly, like, I first heard it from Rob. I absolutely know who you are. I know that Rob and you said it together, or you said it and Rob uses it. I know it's yours. Whatever you want me to do, I'll stop using it. I'll continue using it and give you credit, whatever you want. And apparently that was exactly the thing to say to him. This was at a time, 99, where Dave was very like, he was very at the peak of his successes and just like really almost like a professor. He was hard to approach. And in the end, it wasn't like that at all. Dave and I hit it off really great. He wrote me back. He was like, that's cool. Next time you're in Amsterdam, like we should hook up. And I hooked up with him in Amsterdam a few times, and eventually he invited me to his house and introduced me to his wife and all of his sort of kind of family, and just became really good friends with him. I always thought because I looked up to both him and Rob, I always thought Rob was like, and he was just sort of fun character. But when I went away on vacation with them both, like I realized, well, Rob really is the scholar. He's really, he does go away and have these amazing fishing trips, and he's a traveler galore. But when I traveled with him, he was working on one of his books, and he was like really focused on that book. And Sam was focused on having a fucking good time. He was just like, hey, we should go do this, we should go do that. And so, you know, on that trip, Sam and I really connected and just realized how similar we are. It kind of was frightening, actually. So yeah, you never know who, you know, when you meet your mentors, if you're going to really like them or if you're going to get along. But I like to think that both Rob and Sam are just, I like both a great deal. They're awesome. And they definitely inspired me a great deal with their love of the plants, their love of understanding all aspects of it. They kind of like really took one of the first steps in that level of geekery and of like, hey, let's bring science into this, and hey, we need some PhDs and some testing equipment, and hey, we're going to do this. And just the way they did it, traveling and producing, you know, living and collecting seeds in all the hash producing countries and going back and doing the real work.
So what was the age difference between you and Sam?
Me and Sam, it's got to be like 20 some odd years.
Yeah. It's interesting because your story, it has so many different points in your story where you have mentors that, you know, are coming into your life and that you're leaning into. And it's like this theme in your life, it seems like, that you're constantly courageous and brave enough to eating mushrooms with a guy, you know, with eating 5 grams of mushrooms with people, and you know, it's this. I constantly see this courage fueled by hash that you have throughout, which is a great theme. It's kind of like a really cool thing, and that's why it makes me ask, like, what's the age difference between yourself and Sam, because you do have quite a bit of this, you know, mentorship that just keeps kind of popping up in your life. So.
Yeah, and they're always quite a, you know, like Martin was probably like 15 or 14 years. Well, no, maybe like 8 or 9 years older than me. And then other mentors like Ron would probably be like similar to Sam, like 16 to 22 years older than me. And there's some good folks out there. And if you follow that sort of, you know, as Robert Anton Wilson coined years ago, the coincidence. It's like a very sort of foretelling, leading, you know, whenever I was like, oh, what a coincidence that is. I'd always be like, oh, that's like a sign that I'm on the right path here. Like, this is the right, I was going to maybe go this way, but now I'm definitely going this way. Mentors are essential, you know, like your parents are important, your friends are important, but like find some people who are exceptional at what they do, who make you feel starstruck and in awe. And I don't mean through like popularity and fame, because that's the sort of shallow version of it. I mean like what they're able to do in their skills, and what they're able to, how they're able to execute, and the how many plates they have in the air. All of those sort of aspects, you know, were what attracted me to my mentors.
Like a learning lust in a sense, you know, because you're just engaged so deep in. And just interest, this constant interest in different things that are happening. So no, I can totally relate. And I think it's the whole mentor thing sort of, for me, it beckons back to our friendship, you know, and how we've gotten to know each other. So it's cool how that does kind of have, there's a theme in your stuff or in your story where it's bravery and it's courage, but you're always running towards something new, something, you know, an adventure in a sense. And that's, you know, like hash can be one of those things where it really makes adventures better, you know, as if you have hash for me in my life, especially. So it's cool to kind of see that you have this constant theme like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And hash is always intertwining it. And it's always like the thread that holds it all together. The adventure. Yeah. My adventures, you know, have been, I was one of those guys that really got locked into like going on a little tour, you know, like going and seeing fish a bunch of shows in a row or whatever. I was like, this is going to be awesome. And I love the community and I love the sort of travel aspect of it. But there was a point where I was kind of like, you know, I want to go to Central America. I want to go to South America. I want to go to Asia. I want to like go to Thailand, and I want to go to India, and then started, you know, doing more of that. And really between 95 and 98, I did go to all those countries, you know, and quite a few more on top of that. And just hash was always like a super key part of being in any of those countries. I always had to make sure I had my stash, that I was going to be sort of sorted and taken care of. And sometimes it was even like, oh, I want to go to India and smoke hash chillums with the with the babas and the sadhus on the banks of the Ganges. And then it was like, I also want to go and hang out in Jamaica with the Bobo Ashantis on their property around a drum circle, and also I want to go hang out with the Nyabingis and the 12 tribes, and share my hash with them and turn them onto my hash. And Doc Atomic, I'll never forget, during Shivaratri, I was like in Jamaica, and it was also Bob Marley's birthday, and I was turning on these Rastas to this amazing bubble that Doc Atomic and I made together with 2 of his amazing tops, like beautiful flowers. It was like stained glass window bubble. He had taken his to Kathmandu to hang out with my partner, Mark Rose, and share his piece that he made from it with the Babas on Shivaratri, on Shiva's birthday. Like, it was so fucking crazy, dude. So like dope. Both of us communicating with each other like about these experiences, and it was just it was special for sure to be able to do that. And it's never led me astray. Hash has always led me down a pretty darn good path.
It's been good to us, definitely.
Marcus,
it really has, man.
Marcus, at what point did you come up with the idea for Fresh Headies?
Well, that was after getting busted, and I was like, ooh, geez. Like, I was kind of like, I can't do what I was doing anymore. Like, I have to figure something else out. Like, this is kind of a bit nerve-wracking. I was nervous, to say the least. I knew about these bags. It was 98. I had tried these bags probably, they were created in 98. So my buddies went to the Cannabis Cup that year. I think I went to the Cannabis Cup that year. And they brought a bunch of these bags back. I was actually in BC at this time. They were still in Manitoba. Very nice. And there was a guy who had a hydroponic store here who had the isolator bags. And if you wanted to, a little Kayla Rainbow. If you wanted to borrow his bags, all you had to do was bring him back some of the hash. So I was like, I tried the bags a couple of times, but then Breeder Steve was like, I got some nice trim from this shishka berry yellow line. And I was like, oh, I love the yellow line's my favorite. I'll take that trim. It was also only a 2-bag system. So it was like everything from 190 to 160 to 120 to 90 to 73 all went into the catch bag, and everything below went into the drain. So it was really, it was not the system that it was meant to be just yet. So when I tried the shishka berry, though, I actually made something that bubbled and melted. It was like substantial. The quality was really quite decent for 2 bags. So I thought to myself, I knew Mila like for 3 years. I was like, Mila's my homie. I'll go see Mila. And I went and saw Mila, and she was having like a really bad day that day. There's a lot of people that used to go to her shop. She was always doing business nonstop. And she was also, like a, middle-aged Dutch woman or whatever, like just doing her business thing. Like, I think that people got on her nerves that day, and I just happened to be one of them. And I rolled in like a baller, like I was ready to buy 1,000 isolator kits, because I fucking was 100%. And I just think I don't know. She kicked me out that day. She was like, you silly American, and I was like, oh shit. I remember saying, I'm a silly Canadian. And I just came home bummed. My wife was like, what's wrong? I'm like, she's not going to sell us the bags. Like, I don't think this is going to work out. My wife was like, why don't we make our own? And I was just like, what? What are you talking about? Make our own? What the fuck? Like, sew them? And she's like, yeah. And I was just like, I'm like, are you going to sew them? And she's like, yeah. Get me a sewing machine, the material, I'll sew them. And I was like, okay, which was really quite something, because my wife's very quiet. She doesn't chime in all so often back then, especially. She was parenting and, just like, well, no, she wasn't, because we didn't have kids yet. So that would have been probably the reason. She chimed in the most perfect thing at the most perfect time. Without that push, that got me falling off the cliff. Like, I was in free fall after that, fully committed to creating our own bags. And that was the birth of Fresh Headies and Bubble Bags and Bubbleman and Bubble Hash.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, I mean, that last sentence, there's a lot to unpack there. And before we start unpacking it, I think, is it true you actually had an opportunity to thank the police officer that pulled you over in that stop and explain to him how much more hash is now on this planet because of him? I think that
he was integral as well. He was integral. That is true. Without him, I really don't think I would have gone this direction. It was a very much like often how I need to change direction is with a really hard, like, cuckoo, like, okay, we're going this way now. And that was one of them. I've never been really busted before. And I was like caught red-handed, like busted. It sucked. Prison smelled good that night, though.
So,
jail, whatever you want to call it.
I have a question. You mentioned a little bit before while we were chatting that when you released the bubble bags, you got an email from Skunkman Sam asking you about, where did you hear that term? You got another email from a gentleman named Bear. I'd love to hear that story and what that email said.
So yeah, Bear had sent me more than just one email. That's where I was at before I got cut off there. But the first email is the one you'd be referring to. And yeah, he sent me an email. He was just like, hey, like, it was all about the water extraction. It was just this really weird, kind of awkward, like, I like butter. Like, I just do butter extraction. And I was like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Is he comparing butter extraction to full melt fucking bubble? And yeah, we just ended up having a bunch of conversations. I'm pretty sure I ended up sending him bags in the end. I'm almost certain of it. I said, well, whatever, dude. You can do butter extraction with these bags, or you can do water extraction, but you should try to taste some full melt bubble if you can. I remember being bummed out because it wasn't long after. I can't remember how many years it was because I didn't like email him every day or whatever, but we went back and forth like, I don't know, a dozen times or something. But then it was silence, and I heard he'd flipped his tractor or whatever on his property there and passed away. It's too bad. Pretty cool dude though. Yeah, he was all about this butter thing. He was like, yeah, I soak my weed in, like, literally, like, it's just one of those things where you're like, okay, Bear, for those of you that don't know, is Owsley Stanley. Like, he built the Wall of Sound. He's like, did so much for sound and the Grateful Dead and so much for LSD. And just like, Bear is a fucking icon, like epic. He's if you've ever seen the Steal Your Face and the beautiful belt buckles that he did, they sell for thousands of dollars. He was one of the realest dudes ever. And it was just neat to have someone like that reach out. To me, that would be almost like having Jerry fucking Garcia himself reaching out to me. And I was just like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Butter? Is he fucking... I thought he was busting my balls. I won't even lie. The first time I read it, I was so far over here that I couldn't even understand what he was saying. And in the end, I learned to respect it. It's like, hey, you know what? Everyone likes their different things. I'm pretty darn sure, like 90% sure, I did send him a set of bags and say, look, if you get a chance and you want to maybe not put some of your weed into butter, put it into water and ice. I'm telling you, you're not going to be disappointed. In fact, if he even made his butter with bubble instead of herb, he'd probably be on cloud 9. But yeah, that was my limited interactions with Bear, and yeah, the legend that he was. R.I.P.
You had some issues sending those bags in the early days. I know I've chatted with guys who made a good living driving up and grabbing bags and driving back down the coast, and so what were some of the struggles that you had in the early days getting those bags out to the people?
Probably the biggest one was the monetization, the ability to take credit cards and make online sales. Because initially it was just money orders, like the seed companies. I'd go to my PO box, 7 or 10 or 12 money orders, and I'd send out those orders. But getting the credit card companies on point at a young age of the company, when I did PayPal, made $6,000 US. PayPal closed the account, held the money for 6 months. Then I went to Beamstream on Victoria, made about 10 grand Canadian. Beanstream closed it and held the money for 6 months. Well, I'm a young company. I've now got $20,000 of my money being held up by these two companies for 6 months. I do a third company for 3 or 4 grand, and it does the same thing. And instead of just like acknowledging that this is not doable, I just keep going and come up with a way. I'm like, okay, like I kind of came up with a method of getting it done. So the fourth time, it never, I'm still using it, kind of thing. Like, and you know, the whole multitask filtration kits, how I had to market them. And if it was an overt paraphernalia project, it was a done deal. So I followed this very specific route with bubble bags and made sure that it wasn't like fraud, that it was legitimately like, you can actually do all of these things with these bags. These are multitask filtration kits. I can't fucking control what people do with them, but I certainly can make videos and be like, this is what I'm doing with them. And back then it was still kind of a little more shady. Now it's like federal legalization. Bubble bags are, you know, legal all over the world for the most part. Some countries they're definitely not allowed in, but yeah.
You were granted a harmonization code. Did you ever think when
That's
starting
true.
that you would have that?
Not really, you know, that took that. Well, the thing is it takes the obstacle to find, right? The obstacle shows itself, and it's your manifestation of what you want, but it hasn't shown up the way you want it to show up, like on a silver platter. Instead, it's shown up as the stupid fucking obstacle that's in your way. Well, the obstacle is the opportunity. And if you let it go by, well, then you're just going to have to manifest another one. But if you actually take that opportunity and say, okay, like, I'm going to fight this credit card thing. I'm going to navigate this and keep going and losing all my money. And oh my God, what am I going to do? And oh my God, I found the right way. I found the right turn. I found the right pattern. I found the pathway.
That's true. No, it's always through the chaos. You know, the solution itself is what really makes what makes everything happen. So it's like you became so comfortable around it, or appreciative of it, or maybe too that just from being around Ron, you got to see how he was able to navigate chaos and bring so many great things into his life. It's that same like courage to just jump into whatever the fuck is gonna manage whatever the fuck's in front of you. So no, it's a good thing.
And believe in it, you know. It wasn't like some criminal thing. It was like, I believe in this plan in every aspect, in every level, and I'm just gonna like put my attention into it. I mean, I'm glad I did. I really am. People said that's illegal, and I'm like, now people say, how much are shares?
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, when you first started Bubbleman, BC Bubbleman, and you got onto YouTube, did you have a plan to do or execute what you eventually did in creating such a large following, or was the idea just educational videos to explain how to use my product?
Well, it was kind of a little bit of all of that. You know, I started my channel, like, I think the year YouTube started, which was 2005, I believe. I can't remember the year that it was, but at one point in time, a friend of mine said, listen, I've just taken over a YouTube umbrella channel called On Air FM. I know you have all sorts of connections in Jamaica. And I'm like, what's an umbrella YouTube channel? And they're like, well, he's like, well, it's like a channel that has a bunch of channels under it. And what it does is it monetizes all the views of all the channels, and then it splits the revenue accordingly to who produced what views. And I was like, what the fuck? He's like, yeah, man, there's like, so my buddy was like a lawyer, and he is an immigration lawyer, and he lives here in my neighborhood. And this woman hired him from LA. She owns a company called Broadband, and which was doing at the time 13 million US a month in ad revenue, her channel alone. But she was a big umbrella. She wanted to buy this channel off these Czech guys called On Air FM, and it was worth a lot. They were already monetized and making pretty good money. And so she hired my friend, but kind of told him all about, like, you know, the value of these guys and how she was kind of taking advantage of them. So he was like, he got them into, they needed to be into Canada to be able to do this deal, and they couldn't do it out of Czech. They had to be in Canada to do this deal. So he got them into the country, And then he did the deal with them, and he took over On Air FM and called me up and was like, dude, I want you to go to Jamaica, convince as many Jamaican artists that they can monetize their channel, and we'll pay them for the views on their YouTube channel, like separate from even their albums and stuff if they don't own their masters. So I was kind of like, okay, like this is actually a pretty good thing. I would go tell this to my, Jamaican artist friends. And so he sent me to Jamaica, and I did all this work, and I was trying to explain to sort of old school guys like Coca T and Toots and the Maytals and, Richie Spice. I'd be like, guys, like even if you just had a channel, you could create a channel, Reasoning with Richie Spice, where you do a breakfast show, or you do like Reasoning with Burning Spear, whatever. Like who the fuck wouldn't want to hear some cool fucking Jamaican artist, conscious lyricist dude talk about his morning? Oh, today we're packing the chillum. Like, you know how popular the cucumber got? Like cucumber. Like way before that, dude, I was in Jamaica telling these dudes, you Jamaicans are very unique, and you have a very unique content to offer, and people are attracted to it. So I went there and did that, and I learned so much about YouTube and how much money they make every month. And that kind of put me together into, okay, I've got this channel, I've got these bags, I was like, maybe I'll just start doing content. And I created this show, the channel called Bubbleman's World. And Johnny B stepped in and was like, I want to be a part of this, and fucking was there at like every video I filmed. He'd show up, and I'd be like, all right, Johnny B. We did Puff Wednesdays, and fucking then Hash Church was born, and we did like 162 of those in a row without ever stopping. And it just, for me, Hash Church was the sort of quintessential, okay, my channel's growing. I've got a fair amount of followers. It's starting to pick up. Do I want to make this all about me? Or do I want to make this all about all the crazy characters I know? It's like, that's definitely what I want to do. I want to make it about all the crazy characters. And so, yeah, Hash Church kind of got born accidentally. And
Marcus,
from there, it was just about creating content. Yeah.
Were there any artists in Jamaica that took your advice and really maybe benefited from it at that time?
We signed all sorts. I mean, I suspect any of the big name ones would have benefited, like Toots and the Maytals. We signed them, and Richie Spice, I believe, got like tons of them signed. It was like the Nomads we signed. Yeah, it was a matter of, you got to do the work, right, and monetize your channel. So it's hard to do that. Like, I remember when I met Jakir, I was like, dude, like you have already lost like a lot of money in monetization because you have millions and millions of views, and on a low end, you get about $6,000 US for 1 million views. So like my video that's like almost at 5 million views on a low end of like whatever it's called, CPA, clicks per whatever, it's $6,000. But there's ways of monetizing that million to make it way more than $6,000. And when you're getting like 50 to 100 million views a month, it becomes extremely profitable for some of these YouTubers. I did okay, but not anything massive. But after telling all of these Jamaicans and really believing it, I was like, why the fuck aren't you doing it? Like, why aren't you doing reasonings and breakfasts and wake and bakes and shows? And I was like, yeah, you're right. I got the ability. I self-taught myself all the editing and the music cutting and then that was the other thing. They all were like, you can use my music, dude. So I have all this Jamaican music on my channel that they monetize, but I'm allowed to have it. So they don't strike my channel and be like, get rid of Bubbleman. I can put their songs up on as many videos as I want because it's their monetization. I'm not monetizing their songs. I just monetize a portion, which is the video. Fucking awesome. It's a win-win.
That is very cool. I wanted to ask you about the term bubble hash and how you came up with that. Sure. Were you influenced by what Robert Clark said to you that day, or was that completely separate?
I mean, yes, but really that was the foundation of what Robert Clark said to me. Wasn't that he said it, it was that the hash melted into a liquid and bubbled through the screen. This was back in the cake mixer days too, like the OG days where we used the cake mixer, which created a lot of froth, which created a lot of bubbles. And that was the first bubbling that I saw in the process. Then I would pull out the hash, sandy hash on the bags, and it also had froth on it. And then when I dried the hash and put it in the pipe and smoked it, particularly the first time I smoked Renee, it bubbled and melted like the hash that Rob, like that I had seen before. I was just like, oh my God, I did it. And so I was super jacked. Like I was so excited. And I was just on Overgrow freshly. I just got on there really to kind of promote this thing. Breeder Steve was like, come on Overgrow, come on Cannabis World, come on cannabisculture.com, come on cannabis.com. All of these sites I signed up for, and I had to make a name. And I was like, well, the bags are for sure bubble bags. The hash is for sure bubble hash. And I was like, I hated the name too, Addison. Like, I swear to God, like when I printed it in Bubbleman, I was also like, I don't know, I wasn't very old, I was like 20 something years old, and everyone, because of it, were like, oh, I thought you were like older and like chubbier. Like they legitimately thought I was Bubbleman. Like, so it was a weird name to pick for myself and not really stoked on, but I also didn't think I was picking it for maybe more than 2 or 3 years, like maybe a year. I don't know. It was just a name. Bubbleman, bubble bags, bubble hash. But it ended up playing out the way it did, popularized, and I'll never forget years later, I was at this thing, certificate of participation awarded to Mr. Marcus Richardson. So this is a certificate that I trained medical doctors in Kingston, Jamaica, on how to, a better understanding of cannabis as a medicine and how to dispense it and how to help titrate dose. Understand the difference between oral and 11-hydroxy metabolite versus the ease of titrating a dose through inhalation or vaporization. And I'll never forget the chief medical officer introducing me and being like, we have this young man from Canada. Please give a warm introduction for Mr. Man. I was like, oh my God, like, this is amazing. Like, I just picked that name thinking it would last 6 months to a year. And now here I am 20 years later being introduced at like kind of like a very sort of prestigious doctor thing. It was just a trip, as life is.
What a reality. That's crazy. No, that's one of those things too where you never think it. You never fucking think it. But now, after all that time, what do you think of the name? Has it finally grown on you or what?
Absolutely. I introduce myself as Bubbleman to people all the time because they'll be like, you look really familiar. I'll be like, I'm Bubbleman. Like, I don't like, I'm Bubbleman. Like, it's not like that. It's more of a sort of humble, like I picked a silly name and now it's attached itself to me. Like, that's who I am.
You can't get away from it. Yeah, at this point.
There's no getting away from it, dude.
Yeah.
So
it shall live on for a bit.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that's, I know, very near and dear to both of your hearts, which is Legends of Hash or Legends of Hashish. I want you to explain to the people how this dinner came about and how maybe the evolution of your relationship with Skunkman Sam is tied with this dinner.
Well, you know what? That was the coolness of Sam, like allowing me in, right? Like by him allowing me in, Legends was really, because Sam had all sorts of great ideas, but Sam had also alienated himself from the majority of the world because he really was like the professor. There's a handful of people that went to his house. He didn't interact with a ton of people. He was just at such a fucking high caliber that he was so like, if he heard someone say something wrong, he would invest all his time to explain to that person why they were wrong. He couldn't help himself. It was like what he had to do for the plant. He was like, I will not let people. And it's like, keep in mind, dude, he's doing labs and shit in like 1984. And like, he's testing and he's breeding and he's doing a lot of stuff that we all did 20, 30 years later and thinking we were pretty hot shit while we're doing it. And then realize like, holy shit, like, fuck, he did all of this stuff, man, like almost all of it, like with a group of people and not by himself, but he's just at the center of this. So allowing me in really gave those guys, because Rob was also like, he traveled a lot because he did hashish and marijuana botany. He was never wanting to get in trouble at borders. He was always like, never wanted videos of pictures of him, like just really like just being professional. They were professional in that sense. And, being able to sit in his house and meet, eventually Michael Rich, who, Michael Rich, we called the Fat Man. He was a big fella. And he kind of was like one of the people business-wise that would them all. I believe, like I'm stepping out a little bit, but Michael was kind of the guy that put people together. And so he died some years ago, but he was also a part of Legends. Like, they were like older guys that kind of wanted to tap back into the scene. And I seemed to be a way to do that too. And I was also like, I spoke of them in the highest of light. These were the years where there's stories of, oh, Sam is a CIA agent or a DEA agent. It's just like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, I've been to his house and had dinner with his family. Like, you couldn't be further. Like, it hurt me when people said things like that. I would feel bad and be like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, you are absolutely wrong. Like, he's a cannabis warrior, like, fights for the plants more than anyone I've ever known. And he just doesn't care who makes the profit. Like, he legitimately doesn't care who makes the profit for cannabis. He's not.
Yeah, he's too disruptive to be any sort of an agent of any type. Like, that's just so
he's a
not
cannabis
his style.
agent. That's what he is.
Yeah,
He's a full-blown cannabis
he's a detergent.
agent.
The only agent he would be is like a
Exactly.
detergent washing out any false reality. Like, because
So true.
what's funny is I remember at the same time, like your explanation of Sam and how just what's the word, like obtuse, like he would walk around the High Times Cup and just call people out, and then if he liked somebody, he would actually be like, here, try this hash, and he would fucking pack a bowl of the most insane hash, and his whole objective was to like get you really high and let you try something that you'd never tried before that would blow your mind, and that was because he liked you, so he was such a prickly fucking pear. Like, what an interesting dude.
I love him.
Yeah. So go on with
that started the conversations. We'd have these conversations, and I can't remember if Michael was there the first time, but certainly Sam was. And if Michael wasn't there the first time, he was certainly there the second and third and fourth. And these guys have all this great access. They're like, Sam had a restaurant that he would go to called the Artiste, owned by Simone, who of course you guys all met. And he would allow us to puff in his restaurant. So one day we were talking about the Cannabis Cup, and of course Sam's been there to every one. I mean, he won the first one in '89, and he, I said to him one day, I think I said something like, "Wouldn't it be amazing if we could take all these people at the Cannabis Cup and run them through an 8-bag bubble bag system, and just catch the 90, like the 120, the 90, and the 73, and have a party for those people?" And this sort of started this conversation of like Sam's like, yeah, all we can do is smoke hash all night. Like, yeah, we can just smoke hash, just smoke hash all night. Like, yeah, like just jacked, right? And I was like, yeah, dude, like I like your excitement, man. I'm liking your excitement. Let's do this. Let's have a party. Like maybe it could be a dinner. It could be a dinner. It could be at the Artiste. Oh my God, let's call Simone. We've called Simone. Let's get some artists involved and fucking create a little card and a little laminate for the legends. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's invite Sid. He'll bring the Hubbly Bubblies and we'll have a crazy fucking Hubbly Bubbly session. One year we had fucking tapes with 2 TVs set up that was old school footage from Afghanistan, 1971, of people in line for the Hubbly Bubbly while people were in line in like 2000 and whatever, in line for the Hubbly Bubbly watching the footage. That shit was fucking epic. And that all happened by smoking hash and having conversation. And it's why it's so important sometimes. It's why it's so important for, tiny little bit of a segue here, boys. The importance of us as cannabis smokers and users to have space to get together and use cannabis together. Because the conversations that ensue from those experiences, those spaces will cultivate conversation that will shape the world the same way the spaces when they were bars in the 1800s, and it was the worker people, the laborers would come and have their beers, and their conversations would shape the world. And then coffee and tea houses came into, and a different group of people, more intellectual, less laborious, different conversations shape the world differently. Now we have cannabis and psychedelics. We need spaces able to do those things together out in the world, because those conversations will 100% shape the world we live in, and Legends is proof of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Was there was it immediately apparent after the first Legends dinner that there was going to be another?
Those guys didn't know if I could sell the 50 to 100 tickets or whatever. That's a lot of tickets. Do you think you'd sell them? So I sold almost all the tickets to the first Legends and the second Legends. That's the part they just didn't know. If they were like, are you going to be? I'm like, bro, first of all, you guys are rock stars and don't even know it because you fucking alienated yourself from so many people. People just having the ability to be at a table with you and like just hang out for the evening. Like it was. And then also me being the stickler that I am, I made it so I didn't care if you were in the cannabis community. You had to earn the ticket. Towards the end, I didn't care. You could pull it out of your ass for all I cared. Like you could have smuggled it, you could have bought it, you could have fucking found it on the ground. If it's the bomb hash, that is the magic key to the fucking party. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the magic key to the party. And I sold those first tickets so easy, and they all brought their wives, and it was kind of funny because I think the wives only came for a few more Legends before they petered out on it.
A lot of man energy at Legends.
Oh yeah, big time.
It's like the hash tinker get together extraordinaire. Like,
yeah, basically we knew after the second one for sure that this could be really whatever we wanted. But they're old school dudes, so we all just kind of agreeing, like, let's just keep it small, let's just keep it tight, let's just keep the cameras out. And you know what? I think that the environment did dictate that at that time, and now the environment's dictated, that because now Addison's come into the Legends of Hash family after probably almost 20 years of throwing events in Amsterdam and Barcelona, Vancouver, even one on a boat in Jamaica. And him and Kevin really put the first one on ever in the US, in California, in the epicenter, in the center of the
LA.
cannabis universe, like really kind of crazy. So that was scary, like no one's really approached me about that before, but these guys did. They were like, we want to throw the Legends. We don't want to like fuck with it. Also recognize that the times have changed and we can do different things now. And maybe it's not so bad to have a phone in there and a camera, and maybe we can like actually get some sponsors of, like this terp timer. I fucking love this thing, dude. This was one of the Legends.
Octave.
Octave with the magnet on the bottom. Jameson knows because he was hitting it with me for the whole time in Kelowna. So, things like that. I'm sure this guy will be sponsoring the next Legends of Hash. I can't imagine that he won't. Good products like that. So it's starting to create this like, okay, Legends is a place where maybe it doesn't have to be so private and we don't have to own it anymore. And I would like to reiterate to anyone listening, Legends of Hash, Sam's not the legend. I'm not the legend. Rob's not the legend. No one, we're not the legends. Okay. The Legends were always special places that we would celebrate. And I don't have the thing, but like the Garden of Kafur was the legend one year. Like Baba Koo was the legend one year. So, that kind of also was changing. Like now, like, yeah, maybe because I really like the way Addison was saying it, like the legends, like, oh, you guys are the legends. Like it's slowly changing. Back when we threw it, that wasn't the case. But now these young hash makers who are also growers and selectors, and they've just like stood on the shoulders of giants, but also projected themselves upward to a level of incredible experience, olfactory, sensory science overload, that I guess they are the legends now, and for this Cali version, Addison was calling it, these guys are the legends, man. They're coming and they're the legends. So things can change. Things don't always have to stay the same. And because we want things to change, that's what Legends has done. And I'm super stoked to see where it's going to go. I love the idea that we have a website now and you can actually go buy, the shirt from Legends of Hash. Hopefully, eventually we'll get more of those up there, posters and shirts from past events, and use it as a place to point our flashlight as heads in the community, of the high caliber, the products that we use, not the products that we're trying to monetize.
It's like we're sharing our list of what the tools are that we use and specifically why. And, it's Legends is also expanding into a community of communication around hash and around the vibe and what's going on. And from the equipment to the tools to even just like, the idea of bringing the glass blower into Legends and saying like, hey,
exactly,
these guys created the scientific equipment that's being used for us to do the terpene analysis, for us to, and I always joke and say that it's terpene analysis equipment, but
well, it is.
when you really when you get into the right rig at the right size that has airflow correct with the right banger that has the right surface area that then has the right cap that restricts correctly and allows all of this to occur. And then the terp timer that laser reads the temperature for us, and we put the hash in. Good fucking Lord, what happens at that point is we're able to really at different temperatures taste all of what's going on in there and then experience the high and then clean it up and do it again. And people, with this community, with the way it's working now, we're all able to get together and talk about how that works. And, we were talking, Jameson and I were talking earlier about genetics and pipeline and what pipeline's kind of being created to do for hash production in the solventless world. It got into we were talking a little bit about genetics and I was like, oh, I'm grabbing these genetics, this Moonbow that a buddy selected and this, this other one that someone selected. They're the actual cut that these guys have been able to select that produces the best amount of solventless hash if you know how to unlock it, if you know what to do.
Yeah.
So give the cutout to everyone. And
see who knows.
It's still gonna, and see who can figure it out. Just because you just solved the part of the problem, and you come back into the room where the whiteboard is, and you go, "Hey, I got this answer," and then you run back out of the room. And that's what the community is about, and that's what I love about hash. That's what I love about Legends, and what it's kind of turned into is like this bubbling, boiling cauldron of hash and hash community. And I think Web3 with NFTs is now going to add to that, allow us to kind of tighten it up a little bit more and really, expand what we're all doing in a closed-knit community that can't be falsified, that can't be bullshitted. And, with the Legends website, like you said, now having a website that we're able to curate the same way.
Bingo.
The sponsors that we put together. Curation.
Curate.
That we're able to curate in a specific way. This is the Legends
of Hash curation. We're curating an art installment dinner. We're curating like the products that we stand and believe. I mean, I could be selling all of these products on Fresh Headies if I just wanted to sell them for profit. But I like the idea of the curation part of it and really this is very specific.
Refine.
These are things we like. These are things we enjoy along with our, sessions that we have.
Well, in surfing, they call it stoking someone out, and we're refining the experience by saying, and to make an announcement. I spoke with Octave the other day, Meister. They're more than willing to jump in with us for the website. They're going to do a Legends design for us, and we'll be able to sell the different designs from each series that we do, which ties into some of the marketing. And I had some great conversations with Deppy on 420 to talk about their whole NFT program and how that feeds into what we're doing at Legends with the old series that, I told him, I said, man, you've done such a fucking great job with building and curating a series after series. And he's the real guy that's sort of come forward and said, hey, there's always been drops when glassmakers made the next version of iteration of what they've created. But Scott's done a great job of sitting there and having Insta Snacks, Alex, the guy that works with them, who's the artist that creates all of the designs. They've created all these series. So now you can bring it all back. So it's, it's such a fucking privilege to be in a position to actually get to do it and to share it. But at the same time, I feel like our whole group of friends, like all of us are just, we didn't like that people said that stoners couldn't do things. So we all said, fuck you. And we all have that in common, that we kind of got together and said, well, fuck you, watch what we can do. And that's sort of what I love about our group of friends and how it has, it's so nice to kind of see that take it to that level. So
I wanted to show this picture because it was just so perfect. This is like a
Octave doing it. Meister. I love it.
Yeah, my pipe sitting on the alchemy jar fits the Octave person perfectly.
See? No, it's all the tools that it takes. I mean, I've joked about it. We were talking about it, me and you, when you were saying that the pre-roll joints with the rosin in them are so useful because you can't take all this shit up on the hill with you when you're snowboarding or when you're walking the dog. So it's nice. I love now how the evolution of our industry and how rosin now is in every fucking pre-roll. You know, it's like you can hit a fucking fat ass rosin doink anywhere, and it's just sort of evolved into that. So it's crazy to see. Does it trip you out? I've got a question for you. So does it trip you out to look back at the industry and to look back at all the multiple states and countries? Now you've got United States legalized, you've got Canada's legalized. Does it blow your mind and trip you out? And how do you feel when you look back and see how much you've influenced a lot of that? Like how you've influenced solventless hash, you've influenced all these things that have evolved. I mean, does that blow your mind? Like, how does it make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel like I wasn't wasting my time, at least, and that I was a part of something that other people were a part of, and that we all sort of pushed it over, you know, the metaphorical finish line or starting line, whatever you want to call it. I mean, my friend just WhatsApped me. He's in Holland, and I just said, "How's your business doing?" He's like, "It's okay. I'm in 5 countries. You know, I'm here in Canada, and it's pretty incredible the way we have this system. Like tons of people complain about it and they're upset about all sorts of things. And I could definitely complain about more than a few things, but I also remember what it was like to have a gun put in my face and be locked in a cage and like, you know, all of that sort of stuff that used to ensue. And so I just feel that it's just way better. It definitely needs more help, you know, because cannabis is a recreational drug, and some recreational drugs like alcohol and, you know, tobacco are absolute poison. Then that cannabis probably will only have to be so clean. And then you also have a medical, but the medical is something totally different where it really has to really be clean. But then you have the systems built in a way that the medical patients are more likely to go buy the recreational cannabis products because it's more available. And you know, like there's more, if you buy something that you like, it'll be there in a longer time. Whereas the medical one, people are just kind of putting their small lots into it. And it's just unfortunate the way it is right now, but it's also very fortunate the way it is because we're very lucky to be able to be a part of this system and just change it within. You know, if there's things that you don't like about it, you know, there's a lot of different people that work at the provinces, and not all of them come from legacy or come from cannabis knowledge. So it's, you know, a lot of them come from lottery and liquor, and so they have to learn about it. And, you know, like when we said we wanted cannabis to be legal, I think some people meant we want this to be legal, but we still want to keep it for ourselves. And then there was another group of us that were like, no, we want everyone to have this. Like, it's for everyone. So now, like, when you have the everyone for everyone vibe, you have to acknowledge that it's okay for even the ex-cop, the judge, the whoever. It's like, I'd rather the judge be into weed than like arresting people for weed. But other people are like, that judge used to arrest people for weed. He should never be allowed to be involved in weed. It's like, well, really? Like, wouldn't you rather him be cooler? Like, if he could be? So I'm
never
kind
mind,
of of that
like, let him
mentality.
navigate. Yeah, I mean, never mind.
Well, just let people make their mistakes.
Yeah, if someone used to be against it and now they're not, what I always say is like, let them navigate. Like, it's not going to be easy, but let them navigate. You know, it was hard enough for us. You know, they made it hard for us, but now, you know, I'm not going to take it up and make it hard for them. Like, hey, you know, like when you want safe access to cannabis, I'm going to step out of the way and give you safe access. That's not an issue. It's, you know, but at the same time, it's not easy. So have at it, you know, definitely.
Exactly. And they're noticing, they're learning, you know, like it's a big thing here in Canada. The system built in a very difficult way, you know, like a perfect example is like, I want to do small lot releases, pragmatic releases for the recreational brand, rather do my solid, I have this every day as a medicinal brand. So if someone actually likes it, they can get it every time they need it. Well, the system is built to create the opposite. The small lots go to medical, to shelters and the Mendos and these groups that are selling medical, because if you sell small lots, the provinces don't want small lots. They want like a certain amount. And if they order like 4 kilos and then they sell it out in 2 weeks, they are going to expect 4 more kilos, maybe even 8 more kilos like that. And if you can't provide it, you get punished. Also, don't order from everyone. They say no to some people, which is terrifying. It hasn't happened to me yet, but oof, the idea of my products not being picked up, it's like a double-edged blade. It's we just got picked up by a province. You're like, woohoo, that's like 2,000 stores potential. Or it can be, we just are TV'd, returned to vendor, we're not selling in that province anymore. And it's like, ooh, we just lost all those stores. So it's sort of scary in that sense, but they're learning. I've met some pretty cool people that work at the province that are into herb now. So it's slowly but surely seeping in. Let them navigate it. I get that they're slowing it down and it's driving everyone nuts. The fact is, you can go to stores and buy hash and beverages and vape pens and all of these things. Companies seem to be paying more attention to growing better cannabis, learning about living soils. Hopefully our regulations at one point actually allow full regenerative living soil, like DEM Pure certification soils would be amazing. One step at a time. For me, it's very difficult even for me to navigate the Canadian regulatory framework. It's not easy, but I feel blessed to be able to do it and put the work in.
Marcus, I wanted to circle back and ask you one more question about Legends. Was there one dinner that stood out above the rest as more memorable?
I mean, not really. Legends was always and it was so trippy. It was always amazing, like painfully amazing. Like I just got higher than I've ever been in my whole life. There's people from all over the world. You could feel the dynamic energy of the people had curated into that room. And it really was sometimes like a 90, 120, 73 or an all 90. Like we just got all the 90 heads and had a party with 50 of us, like I can remember Wally Duck from Australia back in the day and Gypsy Nirvana and the DNA boys and Soma and Mila was at the party and just all sorts of really cool people made it to those parties that absolutely loved hash. The whole purpose was not to promote our brands, not to promote social media, not to promote any of that bullshit, but to truly just enjoy an evening together, celebrating our love of hashish.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool that, I learned from somebody else that you would go out of your way to, invite Mila every year and say, hey, listen, whatever's going on between us, this is a celebration.
Every year. Yeah, man, of course. Yeah, it was, it was for a celebration. It was funny because one year and it was like the second year I invited her, she was writing a book and she brought postcards and she put them, I watched her do it. She put her postcard at every table on the plate in the entire restaurant. And I was kind of like, I remember just being like, fuck me, motherfuck. Just kind of like, really? And then I was just like, you know what? And I think Sam was also like, what the fuck? And I was just kind of like, you know what? It's all good. People picked them up right away and put them away and they were appreciative. And I was kind of like, okay. So of all the people that actually, the only person to ever promote themselves at a Legends of Hash dinner was Mila.
That's too funny. I wanted to ask you about a story that I know you've talked about in other interviews, but I think is really great and connects you to the glass scene, which I think plays a really integral role in the hash scene. And I know you and Addison are working on the Legends dinners with Mothership, and so you connected with Marble Slinger by happenstance, and I believe also Jason Lee. And I was wondering if you could share that story with our listeners.
All right. So to tell this story the most entertaining way and the most trippy way will be to mention that in '95, I met 3 separate people, all separate from one another. And I would not see those 3 people again for almost 3 years to the day, where within 30 days, I would see all 3 of them again. And so in '95 on Fish Tour, I met this kid, Zach, and he was having all his glass broke. It was in Missoula, Montana. And I said, fuck this place. You should follow me back to Manitoba. We got a whole scene. We got glass. We got fucking a hemp store. We got like a head shop. And Zach started following me back and he lost me in a snowstorm, him and his buddy Huck. So Huck and Zach lost us. We were never to see them again. They were these super cool glass blowers. I felt an immediate connection with them. They lost us in a snowstorm and just had no idea of contacting us. This was before cell phones. Later that year, I would be in Amsterdam for my first trip to the Cannabis Cup, and I would meet Aaron, the marble slinger. And then I also met his kid, Steve, Smiley Steve. He was a really cool dude from the US. All of them were from the US. And I'm like, it's funny because the 98 Portland show, July 15th, came on the radio the other day, Sirius, and I was like, fuck, I was at this show. This was the show right after Vancouver and right before the two Gorge shows. So I crossed the border with all the freaks. I didn't have the best of luck crossing borders, but I thought, usually the best time would be for me. I had just cut my hair because I had been busted, so I had short hair, and I went over the border in a brand new rent-a-car by myself, full of fish, in a fish parade of fish freaks. So they were just waved me right through. And when I was driving through Portland, we were leaving Portland that morning after the show, and I seen this kid all slumped over on the left side of the road. And he wasn't hitchhiking yet, but I could tell I could just see it in his aura. He broke down and had no ride. And he had all the patch pants. He looked like a typical sort of tour rat kid. And I drove right by. He was sitting in front of a A&W on the wrong side of the road to be hitchhiking to go in the direction of the Gorge. And in my brain, I had a thought that was like, you should go back and get some onion rings from A&W. So first of all, let me explain that I do not eat at A&W, and I don't even like onion rings. So I was like confused by the thought, and I even remember going, what the fuck are you talking about? And then it being like, yeah, onion rings, man, like those would be good. And you know what? You could check to see if that kid's still there, maybe have someone to ride with. And I'm like type A. I don't even turn around if I pass the gas station by 100 feet. I'll just be like, oh, I'll just run out of gas and just keep driving straight. I never turn around. I'm fucking type A, just part of my personality. So I turn around and go back, and he's now on the wrong side of the road, hitchhiking the right way if he was there when I initially went. But I'm now coming back. So I call him over, and I'm like, hey, dude, like, what are you doing? Are you going to the Gorge? He's like, yeah, man, my car broke down. I was like, no problem, man. I just want to get some onion rings. And I even remember going into A&W and still buying onion rings with him next to me, marble slinger, and he gave me a marble with an ohm in it. And it's crazy that it's not just in my desk, but I think I put it somewhere else. I still have it for sure, but it's an ohm marble, a really cool old school pulled ohm marble. And I was like, holy shit, thanks. I was like, yeah, I'll give you a ride. And then he's like, oh, I've also got some friends. And now I'm like, oh my God, like I don't, like one person's enough. I don't need like 3 fucking wooks in my back seat on the way to fucking fish tour here. And so it ended up being Jason Lee and his girlfriend. And Jason Lee at the time, Jason Lee and Marble Slinger are both exceptional glass blowers, but back then Jason Lee was like on another level. He was really quite substantially just excellent glass blower. His girlfriend was also a nice person. She made like the patchwork that a lot of the tour kids were wearing. And so I went to the Gorge with them, partied with them, stayed with them, like fucking enjoyed fish, tripped, and just had a great fucking time. And then like I go back home, and like a month later, Slinger gets back in touch. Hey bro, like I think my roommate knows you. He says he met you on fish tour. And I'm like, I doubt it, dude. Like I haven't been to that many fish shows for your roommate to know me. Like that would just be way out there. And he's like, are you sure his name is Zach? And I'm like, Zach? I'm like, fuck, I think I did meet a guy named Zach on fish tour. So it ends up, and Zach was like a brother from another mother. Like this is a homie, bro. So Slinger brings Zach into my life again, and we're just super tripped out. And within 30 days of that happening, this is all 3 years later, after I met all 3 of them, I meet this Smiley Steve kid, and he's now living in Vancouver growing weed here. So Zach, Slinger, and Smiley Steve all come back to my life within like legitimately like 17 or 18 days. I always say in less than a month, but I think it was actually less than 3 weeks that they all came back to my life after meeting them 3 years prior. It was very strange. I call that the coincidence. All those people had a fairly important part of being in my life. And, Slinger and I would go on to do the glass show, the Degenerate art glass show at my gallery, The Melting Point. We would go on to do the Regenerate art glass installation at my gallery. I did Legends of Hash dinners at that gallery. Just good fun kept ensuing.
That's very cool, man.
So amazing.
So
What do you oh, go ahead, James.
I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about the history of concentrate consumption as you saw it. I mean, I listened closely to your interview with Shiragam, and definitely had some questions about the Holy Smoke guys and the Mayor rig, and I think that we'd be remiss if we didn't have you on and give you a overview of your view of how concentrate consumption unfolded in front of your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, before full melt bubble, there was no real need for it. There were oil guys, and they mostly did it off, blades or spoons if they were lazy and hitting it too hot, or cigarettes or joints, rolling it into papers, hot knives. There was a point where the Holy Smokes guys had created this thing called the Mayor, and it was like, because their buddy Terry was making this oil, and he figured out like charcoal filtering before most people. He also figured out how to like distill the solvents to get any contaminants like lead, rust inhibitor that's in like naphtha, or all of them have something. It's insane. So Terry had figured out how to make this really nice red oil, eventually honey oil, and people were hitting it in the Kootenays, and they designed this, it was like a spoon bent over a blowtorch, and it was like clamped to, it was like super hillbilly style. And then they eventually put like a glass bell over the spoon, like about an inch over the spoon, that went into a tube that went into a bong. And then you could hit, it was like a water pipe. Like, it was insane, dude. The Mayor like hurt a lot of people. And with the combination of this oil that Terry was making, it was just so strong, and none of us had really that was the oil connect. I'd seen oil guys before that had dirty fingernails and like worked mysteriously in garages with weird chemicals, and never seemed to have a nice product, and didn't have a problem putting it in a bottle cap before they burnt the plastic off the bottle cap. All of these things added up. And so they made this nice oil, and the Mayor was born, exposed breeder Steve to it, and he like absolutely crushed half the world with it. Like, he just thought it was the greatest thing ever, just getting people way too high, hitting way too hot. I was less of a fan, but it was kind of an introduction to dabbing. I was a little later to dabbing. Slinger got me into pipes. I was a joint guy. He really got me into pipes, but he got me into pipes at a time that was like, I went right into, my inspiration was Skunkman Sam, who hit off the tightest stainless steel screen in a pipe, his hash. He put a couple screens in there so it didn't melt all the way through, even though it still did. And I was more into that. I can really give credit where credit is due. Like, the person that I saw pushing the dab culture of solventless is the guy who coined the term in the first place, like Nick. He was in Colorado. Everyone was dabbing butane. People thought dabs were butane. No, it doesn't have to be butane. It's bubble too. I was hitting with a beeline wick, on a screen, and melting and vaporizing like that, and getting those great clear dome shots. Jeremichael, as the boys from fucking Colorado would call it, jigs and whatnot. But Nicotine was really the one that was like, no, this can be dabs. This is dabs. Like, it's solventless. So that's really the term kind of was born out of the fact that he was trying to explain to people that this is a dabbable product, but it's solventless. And of course, the whole community is like, well, it's not actually solventless. It's full of volatile organic compounds, which are solvents. It's like, fuck you. Water's a solvent. It's not this endless fucking semantics that water hash people get into with other extractors and whatnot. I still respected it. I saw him doing it. It was something new. It was like, okay, he's doing his own thing. He's like, he's fucking teaching people about this solventless thing. And it was legitimately like the way that I saw the dabs kind of explode. I had a friend called Clear Domes years ago, and he was got to get into dabbing. You got to get into dabbing. And I was all kind of like, I've got I do dab. I dab with Beeline. He's like, no, I'm telling you. I know he's out there telling everyone that he turned me on to dabbing, and he legitimately was one of the people that 100% turned me on to dabbing. So I love where it's gone. I got to give shout out to Brian from D-Nail, the work that he's done. is pretty incredible. You know, he sent me these sapphire dishes years ago that were just like some of my favorite surface areas to puff off of. Very delicate. I love the science work that he's doing with temperatures, and you know, the whole concept of everything that they're doing. And shout out to JP for the Terp Slurper and shouting me out in the magazine, telling me that I helped inspire it through a conversation I had with him years ago about sipping the terps. And you know, shout out to all of these guys that are sort of pushing. It's why there's always been the glass and the hash connection, going back to that legend, going back to meeting Slinger. Hash and glass go together like, you know, fucking peanut butter and jelly. Like they're just like when you're the hash guy and you meet all the glass guys, it's like every single one of those dudes is your biggest fan and vice versa. So meeting Slinger, and I didn't just meet Slinger. Slinger was roommates with Zach. Zach was connected to Pedro Smiley, and on the list goes. So there was about 15 plus glass blowers, Kevin Nail, that Slinger brought into my world, and they were all in Bellingham, you know, and they all burned those Herbert Arnold German torches. And it was amazing to meet them at that time and go see fish shows with them and have them come up. I lived first down from the house I'm in right now when they used to come over and hang out on the hot tub. And when I finally convinced Slinger to move to Canada, he moved into my house here in Lions Bay. He lived 2 doors away from where I am right now. So that was also a pretty crazy time.
Wasn't there a story about those torches?
Yeah, I think I never remember which brother it was, Ezra or Eli, but it was one of those brothers that bought all of those torches. He bought like 14 of them or 12 of them and basically gave all those guys. These torches were complicated. Like at the time, it was a very simple Carlisle torch with like 2 nozzles. And then you had the Herbert Arnold torch, which is like the fucking 90 micron full melt torch of glass welding and melting. 14 different little tubes and nozzles and twisty things, and these guys didn't anything about it, and they just sort of taught themselves. And Jason Lee was another one. Marcel Braun was another one. Super high caliber, high level guys. They were all together, and Slinger brought all of those guys into my life. So bless him for that.
Was there a point in time where you were smoking more Sift than Bubble?
No, I never had quite that access. It got close to being equivalent, but the highest quality Bubble and the highest quality Sift, to me, they sit on shelves that are at the very same height. At that point, it would be like, oh, I just prefer the particular volatile organic compound profile that this one's producing over this one. But when you get whatever you want to call it, quads, Le Top, you know, aces, I don't know what you want to call it, but the best is the best. And when you have it, you smoke it till it's gone. And I have had Sift and Bubble both at the same time, where I had many grams of both, like many, like 40, 50, 60 grams, and just like puffing them. Like I loved the Sift because it was like sweet skunk and perfectly aged, and it was like dessert and stunk the whole fucking room up like haze. But then I also loved, the sweet skunk. But then I also loved the Crush, which was a different hazy one, and I had that one in Bubble. And it also stunk the room up like haze, but a very different haze profile. And it was a little bit more energetic, and it was a lot stronger. So that was like, those are 2 I can remember where I had like probably close to 100 grams of each one that I was puffing. And I didn't just puff one. It was a very much a shared state. The best is the best, no matter how you made it.
100%. Marcus,
rosin, melt, whatever.
100%. Can you take us through the evolution of static tech in the scene? I think you've got a really unique insight on that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, you know, initially I started showing people. I remember talking to these guys years ago and reading Rob's book and the hashish thing and being like, okay, it's like, I can make single screen Sift, and I learned about that. And then I started, you know, kind of macro photographing and learning more about that shit. And basically it was like, I started learning that when you sifted, everything fell down on the top screen. And what you wanted to do is you wanted to push those little broken pieces. And I was using a card I had just a big business card, a strong business card, and I'd rub the resin back and forth over the screen. There's video in 2012 where Johnny B comes to my house and he brings dry sift, and I photograph it under a microscope and show how utterly disgusting it looks. It's like 85% contaminant, 15% heads. And I say, I'll show you a little trick. And I just use a small bubble box. I'm going to card this hash, and we're going to very patiently, what's going to happen is we're going to break all the contaminant up that's non-glandular, and it's going to push through these little holes, and all the heads are going to stay on top. Well, after 42 minutes of carding, you know, jokingly, sort of slow and talking and shooting the shit, I loaded the bowl up, and there's a video of it online on Bubbleman's World. It's one of the first Johnny B videos. It's full melt, like the dry sift. I also photographed it, and it's like almost all heads, like 98% heads. John, of course, is just like, what the fuck just happened? We hit this bowl. We're laughing. We're rolling around on the ground. We can't even finish it. It's so big, and it's boiling, and just like full melt dry sift. He's like, his eyes have been opened. He cannot believe it. So I shared it for the first time. I believe it was 2012 on my channel. And that was the first time I showed people how they could make full melt dry sift. But you had to be very patient, and it was a very small amount. But if you wanted to try it and you had sift that you thought was good enough, this process was a surefire way to getting there. Eventually, D420K decided that he would use a bigger card, and he started using the iTunes cards. And he was like, oh, dude, it's like it never cleaned the way he wanted it, but he's like, it's sort of statically attracting. And we learned that, okay, the resin is attracted to static. Now, unfortunately, and this lesson came later, it's not just the heads. Everything gets statically charged when you create the charge. It's all sitting in the charge. And so everything will stick to those little, I used to do it with the iTunes card, and it would kind of, I mean, to me, I photographed it, it was still full of contaminants. But then this guy, Mies, came out. And I can't remember his YouTube channel, but he went by Mies, E-Z-E. And he was like, I'm doing a DVD case, and I'm wrapping it. He might have even taken the card first and wrapped it in parchment. DVD case was the key because you needed the edge, right? So what happened was the charge was different enough that when you dragged it over the parchment, or the screen, sorry, the charge would put heads on one side and contaminate on another side. And I photographed that as well, so that we could see it and understand, like, look, this is clearly contaminant. This is clearly almost all heads. So you'd see people like me using just the one side. I saw people blowing up a rubber glove, and instead of carding, they started using a rubber glove. And then I even saw people using a glove on their hand. And I wish I could remember these people. I know Tan Hat is one of the guys that's been doing for a little bit, but there was a few people. Stephen Marek is one of them on my. So these people all congregated in Team Dry Sift, a group I started on Facebook, and that's where we kind of all. There's another guy, Felix. So that's, you know, with this process, you have to understand too. It only works with the greatest material. It's not the be all end all thing that's going to clean every shit thing that you have. If you don't have good material, it doesn't react and it doesn't work. And if something's just out of whack, one of the variables, your hand's too wet, something happens, you're not creating enough of a charge, it doesn't work. So it is finicky. I only put my video up very recently of using the glove with Johnny B. I knew his material would be baller. I did wish I had my black gloves instead of the green ones that he brought. But yeah, the process is twofold. You have to be pushing the material down and breaking it through the screen while creating the static charge to get the material to stick to your hand or your glove or your fucking, you know, like the Jungle Boys were using the paint rollers. I think the glove works pretty damn good, but I'm sure in the next 5 years, we'll see people using things that just make us laugh so hard. They'll be full of resin. It'll be amazing. But yeah, that's sort of where static tech is now. I put it out there on Bubbleman's World, and it only has about 6,000 or 7,000 views. So it certainly hasn't gone viral as of yet. I don't think it's as unique as rosin. I think that went through the community like wildfire because of the implications of a high school kid being able to buy a nug and squish it and now have a dab. Like, that was insane. I don't think the static tech is quite on that level. But it is an amazing way to try to see the quality of your resin, to learn your resin, and to isolate your resin to 99.9% purity, that can never be a bad thing from the ultra head perspective.
Yeah.
That's a great segue into my next question, which has to do with the Soil Groans video. When he dropped that video, I want to know, what were your immediate reactions? Was your mind started to race, or did it take some time for you to wrap your head around, the true potential there?
When I saw it, I immediately thought back to some hash that I pressed back in the day. It was full melt. The hash was Cascadia. It got pressed a little hot, and it exuded a red oil. The whole top of it was like a shiny red oil, and then some of the red oil came off top of the hash. The hash was like white, like cakey, buttery, like goodness, but on top it was this red layer that just like pressed out of the hash. And that was the first time I kind of saw that and didn't really understand it, and was kind of figuring it out with vaporizers too, about the vapor precipitating back into a liquid and turning into a honey oil. But when I saw his video or his Instagram post, I was just like, holy fuck, like that's, for me, the video itself was one thing. When I did it myself, like minutes later, and then did it with hash, when Jeff Church was like, hey, take a piece of your 25 micron screen and put some hash in there and twist it up and hit it with the hair straightener. I that was absolutely mind blowing too. And then me and Jeff Church went to Barcelona, and we taught everyone how to do it at my booth, like from DNA to Matt the Great Gardener to fucking like Al the Alchemist, like Remo, like everyone was there at the booth, and the booth was my friend Javi's booth, Medical Seeds. Man, it was an eye opener. No one could believe it. We were just making this beautiful hash rosin right on the spot, full of fucking heads that no one could believe that it was happening. So that was very shortly after he released that Instagram post, and he had somewhat of a following, and it did kind of spread like wildfire. But that Hash Church fucking episode, I don't know, it might be 50 or 60,000 people that have watched it now. That one really put rosin on the fucking map. That's where Brian from D-Nail started making the t-shirt press rosin presses. That's where the fucking Sasquatch guys came from. They ended up being a cousin of Soil Groans. Like, it grew fast out of that sharing, that simple, I'm not going to keep this from you, I'm just going to share it. And then everyone got to go wild.
So after that, fast forward a few years, 2018, Daniel Lantella approaches you to be part of Whistler Technologies. Is that something that, you saw coming, or was that a surprise?
Well, I was at that time thinking about some very different things in extraction in regards to sort of cryo extracting and low water systems. And I just felt like, I had approached him. He was doing what he was doing at Whistler Medical. He started the Whistler Technology Company. He said, hey, maybe you want to be a part of this. I was like, yeah, potentially. Explain to me what you got going on. Show me what you got going on. He went and showed his equipment. That was the prototype that was working at Whistler Medical, and I made some hash with those guys. And I was like, okay, this is definitely interesting. They made a lot of hash. They created, good products with his terp reactor that were being very well received across Canada at the time. Whistler was having really, really good business with those types of oils. I think that was probably the most popular those oils ever were, because I'm not sure they're quite as popular today. I'd like to see a re-emergence. But I was kind of like, you know what? You're in Whistler. You're my good buddy's cousin, because Daniel is my good buddy Ryan Nadeau's cousin. Local Whistler families that are connected. And so I used to go sledding with this guy all the time, and he hooked me up with Daniel originally. So I ended up saying yes to Daniel. Liked what his concept was. I liked the equipment. I ended up buying the equipment as a customer myself through my company at Embark, and using it to the tune of like 750 plus kilos that I ran through that thing. So I can, I know the machine, I know the equipment, I know how well they engineered it, I know how high everything's 90 microns. That's basically like, it's not the machine to buy if you're looking for the 25 micron, but if you want to get the 90 micron machine, that is like, it's engineered to last a very long time. And the process has been the same really since for the last 20 plus years. We're just making it a little bit bigger. The process itself, like even the bags still find their way into all these commercial, even if they use big screens, they'll still have on the outpour buckets of the big Russell Finexes and the different screens, you'll still see a bubble bag on there. So as much as it's changed, it really hasn't changed that much. And I'm not sure there's any technology that's going to come around anytime soon and just like utterly crush water extraction out of existence. So it's nice to be a part of a company that's focused on making water extraction easier and better for people, making it less expensive, making the ROI shorter. So you only have to use one person for the machine. We've had some really good luck recently with some of our customers are like using less ice and using even no ice, which I haven't personally seen yet, but they're talking about really, really substantial yield increases, which are, something that I'm going to be looking into very closely with my own equipment. So, the equipment is there, the concept is there. You have a whole team of people who's stoked, and yeah, Daniel's a good dude. I like being his partner over there and being a part of the company. And it seems sort of the natural next stage of me and in my journey to be a part of a company that could allow us to get water extraction equipment to people who want to make more of it than less. And I think that, that whole mentality of you have to be small to stay true, I just don't think that's true. Like, I'm sure the first person to grow a 1/4 acre and grow a perfect garden said, as long as I don't go bigger than this. But then there's people that are like, I have 8 acres and I crush it. Like, hey, I did 12 acres and I have all these beautiful vegetables and like living soil. And you can do things on a bigger level than people think. I just don't think everyone has the vision for it. And if someone does have the vision for it, try not to bring them down on that. Maybe be like, wow, maybe this person's thinking outside of the box, and maybe we could make melt. Maybe we could grow melt on a field and like extract almost all of it off the field right away, and then take it to a lab and isolate it through screens and separate it into microns and have access to full melt hash where it doesn't cost $100 a gram for people to buy.
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
So you touched on Embark, and 2018 was a very busy year for you. You also co-founded Embark Health, and now federally licensed processing facility here in Canada. Can you talk a little bit about how that company came together and what you're focused on today with that?
So Embark started, I guess, man, it's got to be like 2018 or 2019 now. I was approached by my partner, Bruce Dawson Scully, who was one of the founders of Weed MD and created one of the first 15 LPs in Canada. And he came from long-term care. His family created long-term care homes in Ontario, and they were taking care of elderly people, which really becomes a job of drug dispensing. You have to dispense drugs and you have licenses and regulations. He was really used to super strict regulations, pharmaceutical regulations, all these things. But he also thought like, wow, these people could be taking a lot less pharma if they had access to herbs. So he started Weed MD under that sort of concept. And, we went and took it and did it and brought it from a $30 million or a $10 million company up to a $300 million company, and, did his work over there and ended up leaving there. And he wanted to start a company with extraction. And he was introduced by my other partner named Michael Curtis, who had just started a company called DoseCan. And it was basically like an idea and an empty building, no IP, no nothing, legitimately like just an idea. And Graffiti was like, I need that for my new company, Cannabis Wheaton, and paid like $40 million for it. So Michael was like, fuck, like I actually wanted to start a company. I didn't just want to sell that company. And that company is actually like Chuck made it a company, and it's like an existing company. It was an idea basically when Michael sold it. So those two guys came together, and I don't know how, you have to interview them, but I think Bruce was like, we need fucking Bubbleman. He reached out to a friend to get in touch with me, and came out and pitched me on this idea. We want to do this idea, brought kind of a bunch of the people from the team, and I pitched by a lot of people, but Bruce did it in a way that's like, dude, I want you to be a part of this company. You're going to be a founder. You're going to be one of 3 founders. You're going to be free to do whatever you want outside of this. We're not going to try to rein you in or control you. And I was just like, fuck, okay, now you're talking. Because Canopy had told me the opposite. Like, we want you for exclusive extractor for our company. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not something I want to do. And so, yeah, I just kind of went with this Embark idea and thought, yeah, I could be a part of this. I could help build it. And so we started Embark, and, I won't go too into detail. It was very intense. COVID happened. First leadership team didn't have the same vision as me at all. In fact, the opposite vision of me. So we ended up moving on from that leadership team, and, Bruce kind of took the helm again. We ended up going through a sale to this company, Bevcana, and now we've all partnered up and we're all under one umbrella with them. They're really good guys. I like them a lot. They get it. They're the first group that said, let's put everything under the Bubbleman brand. We want Bubbleman hash and Bubbleman rosin and Bubbleman dry sift. And so that's what I've been working on for the last 4 to 6 months or whatever. We've got a whole variety of things that we're working on. It was a really, I got to shout out everyone at the facility. Obviously the leadership team, Marcello and John Campbell and Martino and Bruce from, that side of things, but also like Craig, my colleague, Flamin, who is one of the guys that runs the facilities, and Push, who's our operations manager, and like Karthik and Abby and all of these great sort of people who help keep everything moving and going. It's super trippy to be a part of this thing. It's kind of a dream come true. It's a 45,000 square foot monstrosity hash extraction lab that's all solventless right now. You can only imagine. I'm a kid in a candy store. I love going there. Part of this journey is kind of an interesting discussion that leads back to, Canada's not California. I created an underground sort of prohibition-based sort of world with the bubble and all of that. We've got a community like that of dabbers, but it's not like enough of a community, I don't think, to like support like a large business. It's a very small percentage of the business. So I kind of feel now our mission with Embark is to, bring people along the journey of bringing them from smoke joints, because I'm seeing 90% of the new people that come into the market, they just smoke joints. And if I can bring those people in and teach them about like hash and say, look, we've got this product. It's a simple tube. It's a paper tube. It's got a stainless steel bowl in the end. You can put 0.2 of a gram of hash in, and it's like a little one hitter. And I laughed at this product the first time I saw it. And then when I started packing them with my hash and just using them on the mountain or wherever I didn't have my 14 things for dabbing, I was like, this is one of those products that I can use to kind of take people on a journey where this product only requires a lighter. This product, oh my God, there's 14 fucking things that I need here. And that doesn't count the 10 different kind of hashes that I have. So I literally have 30 things that I'm carrying with me, dunk baths and fucking ISO gallons and all this bullshit. Whereas now I can, like, those people will be scared of that. It's a very hard reality for me to have taken this journey already, gotten to this upper level where I'm just like, I just want to smoke this. Like every day, all day. Like that's what I want to smoke. I want it to smell like fruit and make me feel mildly too high and uncomfortable for a bit. But there's an enormous amount of people in my country that they might want to get there, but I need to help them get there with products like this. The pure hash joint that we do. It's 1 gram, no paper, no glue, no cannabis. That's a unique, novel product they're buying and really liking in Canada. Is it the best hash in the world? Of course not. To me, if I was to say the Gordon Ramsay, I'd say it's a mediocre hash, but maybe that's okay. Like that's not a bad word. So I'm learning that. Yeah. It's very hard. I haven't melted the bubble yet because I didn't have the R&D license, but I'm hoping it's between a 4 and a 5 star. It's a really nice profile. I'm sure people will be happy. We put it at a very low price. Like the bubble is like, I think it's $40 a gram, maybe Canadian, which is like 30 US or whatever. So, doing all of these things, it's interesting have to take this journey and understand that I'm now taking it in a complete and totally different and unique environment from the journey that I took prior. And part of it is turning on non-hash heads onto the part of the plant that they love in that joint is hash. And if I can just get it slowly purified and them experiencing it, I'm fucking stoked. Stoked.
Yep. You're talking about lowering the barrier of entry so that they're able to eventually get to that, full understanding, like that full point of understanding.
Now, at the same time, I also love taking those people. And this is another part of that journey, is turning people on to micro dabs. Micro dabs is an important factor as well. Turning people on to very, very small dabs where they can just taste it, not get uncomfortably high, exhale and have that beautiful flavor, but really like give them almost to us what would be a laughable dab. If more people could learn how to give micro dabs, and you need a micro dab is like, it's the pinhead, right? It's the tiny little tip of the pin. And because I tell people, look, I can give you 5 of these, but I can't ungive you one of them. Or I can just titrate you up there. And so I think there's a real value. I mean, I get that the three of us could sit and just get fucking uncomfortably high and just be on the brink of reality and be like, my God, like most people
audio
are jumping out of their
hallucinations
skin right now. Yeah, audio hallucinations, the whole 9 yards. But a lot of people don't like that. And I want to still introduce them to this product. So we're coming out of a really, like, we're about to really bloom with the company right now after the last 2 to 3 years. A lot of hard work put in by those people that I mentioned earlier. And now we've got it going on. We've got Bubbleman brand in Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. Not sure about BC yet. I think so. We've got our hazel hash sticks in all 5 of those provinces. We're working with Lifest. My buddy Merlin works for this company. He's one of my neighbors, and we're like, let's keep it in the family. Like, you guys are doing sales. You're an LP that's focused on sales. Let's bring you on and see if you can't like bring us to the next level with the work that you're specializing in doing. So it's a lot of business shit for sure, but it's like my passion. I love it. I love the idea of thinking that, right now it's all young and it's new and we don't really know, but like some of these products we're creating could become products that are like a product that you see and use in your daily life that could become a real, like, anchored into reality. Right now, we're just kind of novelly creating products, putting them out there, trying to find what people like. The community that I understand that my community, the legacy community, that you guys are sorted, that you guys grow your own weed, that you guys trade your own resins and seeds, that you have your own connections, and that like, you're probably not my customer base, which is a very hard thing to think. Like, no, like, my bros aren't really my customer base. Now I have to represent who the customer base is, this new group of people coming that I'm excited for. Like, wow, you guys get to start your journey with cannabis and I get to maybe show you a pathway that leads you to an unadulterated cannabinoid and volatile organic compound high.
I feel like the legacy markets in more established states like California, Washington, Colorado have been able to recognize what you just articulated about understanding that, the people who are my demographic might not be the people who I'm creating my brand for. And I think that that's a new realization that Canadian legacy is probably not yet wrapped their head around. And I think that that's a really cool or refreshing perspective, because, understanding that your client might not be the person who's followed you and known you and grown up with you for all those years, I think is something that is, takes a level of understanding of the market that not many people have. So I think that's very cool.
Well, because I already gave those people everything. I gave them everything. Everything I had, I gave to the people that I was educating and teaching, and it was all just a gift. So now this is a different sort of thing where it's like, those people will always be my community and my crew and my family, but I also know that there's this whole other group of people, and I'm not willing to it also comes with backlash, because it's like, like this ego sort of male sort of like a high caliber thing, you can find yourself in like, oh, Bubbleman's selling mids now. Like, that's where he's at. He's just selling mids. It's like, no, Bubbleman's not selling mids. Bubbleman's helping people on a journey to get into hash. And like, yeah, if you want to call it mids, it's not the hash that I would love to smoke every day. Yet, before I accepted selling these, I packed like 20 of them and started using them in my day-to-day life. It was the first hash I had smoked in a very long time. First noticeable thing, here's actually one of the nice ones. This is what they actually look like right here. That's one of the hash hits. And the first one that I puffed, I smelt the smell of that old school hash peppery beta caryophyllene come off the tip of this thing. And I was just like, okay. And then I smoked like 10 hits of it and crushed it, the whole thing, and was kind of like, oh, I'm not that high. Like, kind of gotta be higher. And was kind of judging it from that perspective. Then I sort of sunk into this real groovy, very light high. And I was skateboarding on my electric skateboard, and I just found it to be so awesome. I was like, okay, that was like
different. Yeah.
You know, like the dab's nice too, where you're just like, now you're like dabbed out and you're like electric skateboarding 40 kilometers an hour. You got to pay attention. But this groovy vibe, I found I was only going about 25 kilometers. I was like, I was learning something about hash that I wasn't willing to learn prior. And I was like, okay, this, you know what?
Yep.
It's like whenever anyone asks me what's the best electric pen or electric bong or the tool, and I always say, you know what, the best one is the one that works for you where you are in the moment, the one you have right in that moment. Because for me right now, I want to hit dabs off of a turd slurp. But if I was out skateboarding and I didn't have all this shit with me and I could just pull out one of these tubes and just be like, I'm just going to take 10 quick rips of hash. If I, the biggest pot snob on the planet, can kind of have that experience, what is this offering for the guy who just worked all day and he's building fences on his way home instead of getting a joint? He's like, I'm going to get one of these hash hit things that Bubbleman's selling. I just can't wait to see how it all plays out. You know, I know that the rosin and the dry sift and the bubble will have its place, but this is new. I wish I would have brought a bunch to Kelowna and just given them out. I did give about 4 or 5 out, but I should have brought 100, you know, and just given out 20 grams in hash in 100 of those joints.
That would have been a very cool. I'm definitely gonna go try one. Like I know they're here now, so I'm gonna go grab one because
you know what it makes me think about, Jameson. You know, when we were in Bellingham and I brought those, which is like the craze right now in California, is guys that are taking rosin and turning it liquid and then putting it into carts. And that's been like, you know, in our California market, it's like a 20% growth in the market in the solventless has actually been these carts, along with the, like I was talking about earlier, with the pre-rolls with rosin in them. But Jameson, what did you think about some of that stuff that we were consuming when we were up there at Mothership, that we brought these?
The 710, yeah, those are the best carts I've ever had.
Yeah, like, the 710s.
The only
crazy,
the only satisfactory, like taking the two at a time. That's the closest thing you're gonna get to a real dab. Like that'll mash you up. Yeah, like you're not getting vapor like that off any other. Well, I think
works.
You've done a really good job.
Yeah. Shout out to 710.
Well, that's how we felt the first time Sam poured a couple of grams of his pure dry sift on top of the hubbly bubbly pipe, and we were taking these dabs of like just multiple grams of his dry sift bubbling on this coil, and I felt the same way. I was like, I've never had a dab like that. Like no one's ever had a dab like that. Like that is the most like resin you could inhale into your body. And when you were done, you almost couldn't breathe. Your lungs were like shut down and stuck together after hitting that thing. And of course, everyone just kept getting in line for it. Maniacs.
That's too funny. So what's your current lab setup look like right now, Marcus? Like when you're trialing material from different farmers in the legal Canadian space, how are you performing those test washes?
Well, I mean, we have a variety of water extraction equipment with Whistler Technologies and my own, as well as pure pressure. So I can do washes in any of that equipment. Yeah. I also do tests on dry sifted material. So we have a variety of different kind of screen systems and tumbler systems and cold systems and non-cold systems. So you can kind of test most resin will extract dry better in the cold than not. So that's usually a given. So we also have a walk-in fridge and freezer that we do some of that work in. It's a lot of room. I compress 200-300 grams of dry sift or bubble hash in each press. So between 500 and 600 grams at a time, probably more. I've just never really overfilled it. So, the tests can happen fairly quickly because of our ability and our scale at which we can operate. So we usually get tests in, what'll happen is our QAs, we'll get in touch with the company. They'll tell us some prices. I'll look at some of the cultivars. I'll look at some of the certificate of lab analysis, the COAs. And then we'll get in touch with them and say, let's put our QAs together. Let's put our documents together. Let's accept each other as vendors, or however that works. Vendor qualification, there's a thing that's involved there with QA. They pass over documents. Once it gets to that point, we would produce to get the sample, whether it be a 1 kilo or a 3 kilo sample, have that material show up, and then just have that all sort of planned in amongst the day. We also won't bring any material in that has any bacterial, yeast, or mold failures whatsoever. If the number is high enough that it's almost a fail, and we know when we concentrate it, it will be a fail, we also won't bring it in. So we have very strict SOPs and PCPs that we follow at the facility before we allow anything to come in. And when it does come in, it follows a very strict pathway, lean pathway all the way throughout the supply chain and the building and the process, until it ends up all carted up and boxed out, ready to go out on a pallet, which is amazing. We sell the hash. Howard Marks said to me years ago, and he also said it in his book, there's two kinds of hash dealers: those that require forklifts and those that don't. And so I'm happy to say I'm now finally the former. I do require a forklift. And when you hear the beep, beep, beep sound at my facility, the hash, hash, hash is fucking moving.
That's awesome. I wanted to talk about your thoughts on, the Canadian. I wanted to talk about your thoughts on resin mixing. Is that something that you're currently looking at, or do you usually like to keep each cultivar separated and have those representative of themselves?
Are you talking about mixing cultivars or microns?
Cultivars, both pre and post wash.
I mean, listen, I always had fun with it back in the day. I would call it my lucky day when I would put cultivars together of different microns and different cultivars and mix them all together. It was like, I called it lucky day, because you were never going to get this profile again. It was kind of like good luck. Even if you had a lab, you probably couldn't recreate this shit. I don't know about in regards to, listen, if we were actually where I want to be, which is at a scientific level where the cultivar name didn't mean anything and the chemovaric makeup of the plant meant everything, which it does, then it wouldn't matter, because you could have your subcategories, your Sir Diesel, OG Kush, fucking Straw Nana, but what you could really have is your Vox, like your list of like the profile of cannabinoids and volatile organic compounds. And obviously it would be great if it went well beyond terpenes and terpenoids and sesquiterpenoids and went into thiols and thioates and esters and esterification of terpenes and all of these other things that we're still kind of like, oh, I've only heard a whisper of such things.
That's incredible. That's a really cool way of looking at it.
Yeah.
The Canadian market's in a tough spot right now. Are you optimistic in the short term, or do you feel as though we've got a deep hole to dig ourselves out of?
I guess both. I don't think of us as in the top spot. I've always thought of California as the center of the cannabis universe, regardless of its laws. The value's sitting there and just waiting, and it'll explode the second it happens. When America goes federal, America's the market, like that is the market. But it's cool that we have this little thing, and lots of our companies are American owned, and they've got a foothold, and they've got these companies, and that's fine. I started my company. I would love to operate in the US with Bubbleman brand, and it's something that our company has 100% the idea in mind that that's something we'll run eventually, once we can get with the right people in the right states. Ideally, it would just be a federal flip. We wouldn't have to limit ourselves like that. Exactly, Addison, exactly. So that's something that we're definitely excited about. But yeah, like I say, I think Canada for whatever reason it's happened, it is amazing. You can't look, the federal legalization is quite something. It does come with a lot of baggage and a lot of swag and this whole like protect the children, which is like, that's kind of their mentality, right? We have to protect the children. And it's like, yeah, we should always protect the children, but probably alcohol and pharmaceutical pills are that they need more protection from than say, and maybe even like, obesity from like pop and like bad diets and sugar and lack of movement and like stolen focus. And like, I could go on and on about what we should be protecting the children from, but those are just my opinions. I've never thought that cannabis was something you needed to protect children from at all. I just didn't. And I think once Canada gets on that sort of page as well, where they're like, okay, we can kind of like, look, I think this is how it happened. They're like, shit, we're going to have to do this. And we can't, we've been lying about it for so long. Well, listen, we're going to keep lying about it. We're just going to keep like, say that we need to protect the children, but we'll let them have it. They couldn't just come out and be like, okay, look, we were fucking with you guys so hard. It's a miracle plant. It's going to fucking save the world. Just like implement it all over society. But they didn't do that. They weren't willing to do that. They were like, we need to protect the children from this cannabis. It's like, what are you talking about? What child ever needed to be protected from cannabis? It's almost the most ridiculous statement ever. When I think of myself as a child and my friends like drinking vodka out of their parents' fucking, and then filling it up with water and then like smoking cigarettes and just doing all this gnarly shit that was like, I was like, that shit seemed dangerous to me. Like when my buddies smoked joints, we got super high, but we didn't like throw up all over ourselves and like look and convulse on the ground. Like, holy shit.
Never mind. Well, never mind. The government didn't regulate and control cannabis. We produced cannabis, and technically we were the ones that protected children from it, and therefore you never saw a fucking problem. So if we were the ones that were producing it and you never saw a problem, we've already protected the children from cannabis, motherfucker. Like, we don't need your help. It's just like, get the fuck out of here. It doesn't make any sense. But you know what it is? It's the go-to ace card that any goofball can fucking pull out. That just like the old go-to ace card was, well, we don't know what they're putting in cannabis. I mean, people could be putting cocaine in there, and and that's why we started Steep Hill, was so that we could test cannabis and prove, like, get the fuck out of here. Cocaine's not free, asshole. You don't buy a bag of weed and it comes with free cocaine. Like, this is the drug market, dickhead. Like, drugs cost money. So, no, it's the same exact idea. It's just it's a card that they pull when they are in the wrong and they know they're in the fucking wrong and they need something to go to. And it's just sad that they try to use children as their go-to. It's the same thing. I mean, look at the COVID cold that went around. The same fucking idea. Like, the children technically didn't get it, but it's always, I always feel like, without throwing a billion conspiracies at it all and turning it another direction, that it's always just follow the money. You know what I mean? And like, legalization is once you let the toothpaste out, you can't really fucking put it back in. So they're doing it so slowly and so shitty in a way, while they collect tons of fucking tax money and don't fix the problems quickly enough because, hey, what's a year, what's a month, what's whatever. So, but the fact that we're able to do it and it is happening, for us from a United States perspective, watching Canada legalize nationally and watching it come out, again, like, you can't put that toothpaste back in. So it is cool to see. And you're right. I think once the United States legalizes and, whatever program we agree to, whatever we, they're throwing some ideas around in these last bills that went at 8% tax or something and all thing things, whatever we do and they do put together, it's going to be a major change, like what we saw with legalization in California. But I think the biggest thing that it will do is a conversation that you and I had a little while ago, when we were talking about the scale of change at that point. Like, you were saying that, like, once you were able to sell your hash into different provinces, your scale of business grew so much that you were like, oh, this new. So that's going to be the same thing for us, where it won't happen overnight, but I think there will be. I mean, just think of how fucking big Jungle Boys will be once there's a national, because I mean, look, there's not half brands out there that are worth piss. But when you get into some of the brands that are innovative and really smart in what they do, Jungle Boys is one of those brands that with their Athena and their lighting, moves, and the other what I would call is like, diversification into the same thing, and putting shit together. Just think of what like a Jungle Boys is going to be once you have a national cannabis program in the United States.
Dude,
or you guys.
Trust me, I've thought about it for my own.
You
I thought it for my own, and having like just an umbrella of hash makers underneath that brand, and being like, I want hash makers that were inspired by me, that learned from me, that want to be a part of that sort of team. And I do have that story. I do have that narrative that like you can't just recreate. I got lucky. Like, I won't lie. Like, I really got lucky with the timing of when I came into all of this, and I don't want to piss that away. I want to like working with all the just great people in different states, and fuck, it's a dream, dude. It's the continued
Maybe we
dream.
can do it with Legends. I think Yeah, I think there's many ways
Legends
to kind of make
is
sure that
it's the magnet for all of
it.
those hash makers. It's the hash maker magnet. You throw a Legends in any city. Go throw one in Michigan.
Oh, it's organic and it's natural too. And look at just here today, learning for some people where it came from and how it grew and what it turned into. It's and that's like you just said. Like we could have a Legends, in any state where they've got their shit together, where it's possible, and that's what's fun about it, is to watch it kind of grow and get into that place. I mean, I think there's so much work that I see when it comes to Legends, when it comes to us establishing this brand, and this go-to place for people to, get products that we all use every day. When we smoke, whether it's Pelican or it's, Mothership,
Alchemy,
or it's, these different ancillary clean pump, or just these different products that we all turn to, that we use every single fucking day. Hey, the banger basket guy changed my entire life. Like
Kyle,
like the new banger basket that I got in Bellingham, it completely changed my whole life. I'm like, oh, here we go. Just these great, smart little products. And I reached out to him and
go ahead.
I reached out to him, and he's more than excited to be involved in Legends somehow. So it's just awesome. Everyone that I talk to about being a part of Legends and working with us, that come from our community, every one of them is stoked to be a part of it and to do stuff with it. And it's such a great engine also. I mean, think about that as a platform for us to be able to curate, once again, these great brands and deliver them to the hash community, a one-stop kind of place where like, oh, this thing's been triple vetted, whatever this product is. We're not going to get behind anything that's fucking just some bullshit that doesn't work or doesn't make sense.
We're going to get behind full melt certification.
Yeah, it sort of is. It's a new it's a new certified star program.
It's a full melt belt. It's a full melt belt.
It's the strap, baby. It's the fucking it's the full melt strap all day long. It's certified, curated, Legends curated. But it's cool because it's also another footing for the entire hash community. People haven't had. I mean, think of what Legends was before. Legends was always kind of shrouded in this secrecy, and no one really knew. And now it's. I mean, for us, the phone calls that we have when we're thinking about like, okay, now we're going to take Legends to a 200-person plus venue, or a 200-person, gathering, right? We're thinking 200 to 250 people now, and with full booths, and with the dinner, and with now not just the dinner, but full judging, phones,
the brunch,
and now the brunch the next day. Look at how this thing's, and that's, I think what people, if you're listening, like that's what Legends is going to be, with the sponsors that we've talked about, and growing this thing up, and then also adding the web. Look at like what Legends is becoming is this kind of opening the door's creaked open to different kind of crazy things that bring us all together. And that's the place for it, is to do it through that Legends idea. So thank you for creating that. It was very smart, but then also keeps on giving. You know, it's such a great fucking thing.
Fucking A, man. Legends. Long live it.
Marcus, what are you focused on over the next year? What are you excited about, either personally or professionally?
I mean, this Bubbleman brand thing is a big one. I mean, it just went out to Ontario, Manitoba, and Ontario and Saskatchewan in the last like week or something, or week and a half. So this is like fresh on. This is super new, super trippy. I want to get out and get to as many sort of shops as I can to sort of, you know, do these product knowledge education sort of seminar type things, PK sessions with different people that work at the dispensaries. Look to do a little bit of novel production of new products in the lab. Definitely in the next 6 months, I want to release full melt dry sift. We want to release a gummy, like old school hash that's kind of like, you know, more of that Afghan style, but also obviously temple balls of the highest caliber. So we just want to kind of fulfill that people's hash urges. And we know there's so many of them that just try to hit them all, what everyone needs. We're a hash company, like, you know, and then not only that, but we're also working with some automation folks who are going to come in, and they've already come in and watched processes and just kind of like help automate some of these things so that they can scale up to a degree that that just, you know, widens the margin and makes life easier on everyone.
Well, that's what it's all about. I mean, we got it. Like, there's so much tax, and there's so many people taking their pound of flesh on the way to market, that delivering a solventless product at a reasonable price is quite difficult right now.
It's quite difficult, and I know when some people might have heard me say that, they might have thought like, oh, what the fuck did he say? But it's like, no, listen, like the margin's super important. And so there's things all along the way, like it's like you're going through corridors of cheese graters, and your margin's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller before you can get even halfway through this fucking corridor. So, you know, I call them very elusive pockets of profitability that are available in the industry right now. And like I said, I think that they have the potential of becoming like a Jack Daniels. Now, I don't have an urge for my products to be like Jack Daniels or Oreo cookies. I'm just talking about the like popularity that it ignited and how many people bought that product. And it's like neat to be a part of something so different. I'm still like a pot guy. I want all sorts of flavors, all sorts of different products. But at the same time, as I watch how these hash joints absolutely blew up for us. Like, we sell a lot of these pure hash joints, and it's sort of surprised us. And now we're just like, oh my God, like imagine if we can do this with like our other products too. And now that's starting to happen. They've been selling decently, at least in the last week and a half that they went to market. I think it was $4.20 that Bubbleman brand was available in Ontario for the first time.
That's very cool.
Pretty nuts.
I think you're going to be sifting, selecting, and curating for a long time. I think that's like your life is sifting, selecting, curating, refining, and that's your niche. Like, that's it. That's a good place to be.
Totally. Yep, exactly. And I've got some other things going on. Nice. Other than Embark, I do have a few. You know, when Embark purchased when BevCanada purchased Embark, they also got a chunk of another company I started called Protein Quest, which is the company where we defat the hemp seed or any seed of its oil and create a very golden, very preserved oil, while simultaneously creating very white and pure protein powder isolate. You know, with hemp, it was in the 70% range, which was much higher than the 50% that was on the market, and green and had a bad taste, and ours was tasteless. And so we started this company, and we're moving along here quite lovely, and don't have a ton to talk about it yet, but it's novel, it's innovative, and we're hoping on sort of changing the game in how people access their protein powders, which seem to be very popular with these, you know, artificial meats and whatnot. But we just want to produce good ingredients for bases that are actually like really preserved and high caliber. And the testing that we got done just on the hemp that we did was just totally through the roof, and they really were surprised at it. They hadn't really seen anything like it. So I've got that company going, and I've got another one called 5DG, which is a psychedelic company, and it's kind of a delivery system for psychedelics, but really all sorts of different drugs that you could use it for. And I can't really speak too much on it, but I am partnered up with Dr. Brent Reynolds, my partner in the company, and he discovered like brain stem cells back in the day. His thesis. So he's a real brilliant guy. Works at the University of Miami there, and has been working in cancer and brain research for a very long time. So we're excited. 5DG is a nod to another mentor that I never actually met, but was very inspired by, Terrence McKenna. And he always said, take 5 dried grams in a dark room, and you should find what you're looking for.
I love it.
Yeah.
5DG, 5 dried grams.
That's amazing. I love that, man. That's very cool. And, I know you've got the support of both of us, and I've been blessed to talk to a lot of makers, and there's very few makers that I chat with that haven't been influenced in one way or another by the media that you've put out, and the the sacrifices that you've made, like putting yourself out there, positive and negative, have benefited so many people and really helped. I know myself, I long before I ever thought I'd meet you, I watched, your videos over and over and over, and the knowledge that was passed down. I mean, I think there's a huge community globally that's, super appreciative. And this is definitely not the last time you're going to be on our show. This is the inaugural episode, and we couldn't think of anybody else to start it with. And I know you and Addison are going to be working closely together. So I really look forward to bringing you on again and learning more about what you're working on today, and more stories from the past, because we've gone 3 hours. This could go easily another 6, just if I kept needling you with questions. So I appreciate the shit out of you, and just thank you so much for taking the time, man.
Yeah, of course.
I do have one last question.
Between 2 heads. Go ahead, Addy.
I have one last question. And this has kind of been my trick for you, because since I've known you, you don't come to the United States because obviously, things were just different back then. But now, with all the great things you've talked about, the full legality of your businesses and your, different certifications that you have from the government there in Canada to legally sell and do what you do, I think it's now sort of you've reached the precipice where you've come to the point now in your career, what you do, that you're, able to, I think, come back to the United States, or come to the United States and share. And I think that what I envision is you coming to the United States and sharing in person with the makers what it is that you've understood and developed and been a part of in your life. And that's kind of the next part. So when is it that you're going to take that step to commit to coming to the U.S.? I mean, I understand now that you're certified, you're legal, you don't do any, shady stuff. I don't know if you ever did, or whatever. But now that you can, when do you see yourself coming to the U.S.? Because we're doing Legends in December, the first weekend of December, which maybe that's where you're at. Maybe you're at Legends in December in Los Angeles. I don't know.
It'd be pretty sick. It'd be pretty sick. I've always said, just personally, that I would go when they federally legalized cannabis. That's what I've always said. I'm just like, you know what? If they just could federally legalize. I was close with Obama, I'll be honest. I was like, damn, maybe I could go down there. And then all of a sudden that other dude got in, and I was like, oh my God, like, I don't think I'm going to go down there for a while. And so it's like, this is from the Canadian perspective, right? And I haven't been in the U.S. since '98, since the story I told earlier where I picked up Slinger in front of the A&W there. That was like 1998, bro. So I love the idea of being at Legends and being able to talk to the hash makers. And like, I was so bummed this last year when we did the Legends, because I just wanted to show up on a screen and I had like a 2-minute thing. It was 2 minutes long. And I remember being like, and Sam was bummed too, because he was also like, oh, you know what? I'll fucking go take a bong rip and say what's up to everyone and just be like, what's the best hash? And so I love the idea of that happening in the least again. But I mean, the idea of us being able to be there in person would be, next level, and not impossible. Not impossible. I have my security clearance, and I don't put myself at the level of Mark because he was on some other different level. But at the time here in town, like my business was getting successful. I was working with Mark quite a bit, selling him images and the words for his magazine. And all of a sudden he was like arrested by the DEA, and it was like they're extraditing him to prison, and they were like, he'll never go to prison. And then he was like in 5 years in an American federal penitentiary, which was like, holy shit. Like it was just too fucking much. So I got it in my mind that I was bigger than I was, but I did think of like all of that hash. And I remember Russia like years ago being like, your shit's not allowed in our country anymore. And they sent me like letters and emails that my YouTube channel was blocked in Russia. And so I knew there were governments that weren't stoked on me. And I kind of had to figure that the US government had to be one of them. I always pictured going over the border and then being like, oh my God, Bubbleman, dude, we've been waiting for you, bro. Like, there's been a sealed indictment for you for so many years. Oh my God, we got a spot ready for you and everything. So that's like it's probably totally unrealistic worry, right? Completely.
Yes.
But I just don't know if I would ever go down without just federal legalization being in play and just being like, okay, this is what I'm talking about now. This is not illegal. I can bring my own shit. How about that? When I can bring my dabs and come visit you and you have your dabs and just be like, yeah, I brought a bunch of dabs. Like, apparently we're allowed to do that now. Like, remember when they were like super strict?
I know people that do it all the time.
Tolerance.
So.
What's that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I mean, like legally. That's what I mean.
No.
I'm talking about like.
But still,
we need to start planning Legends Canada is what we need to start planning.
Trust me, I have people bugging me for that too. Like,
bro, like. You need heavy lifting.
It'd be more than you having to come up, dude. That'd be a lot of work. Like we'd have to fucking build a team up here like you have down there. Like you'd have to like it's doable, and Canada's receptive, especially on the West Coast here. They're very receptive to it. But at the same time, we should be planning one for Barcelona in March.
Yeah.
I think for Canada, I think Jameson and his brother are pretty, well equipped to get started with that if we wanted. I think that's definitely
any help, Marcus.
Why not do another one? Why not call up Slinger and do another glass show with another Legends, and we pop off Legends Canada and we just do this.
Then you need the space. If I had the space, I would have said yes to that right now. The space is a big one for the glass show because it'll last like 2 weeks to a month. So you got to. That's just a matter of finding a gallery. Not impossible, but it also involves finding a gallery that also we could do the Legends at. That's the ideal. You do before you open the gallery. Legends is done at the gallery with all the art. Bring in the food. Do all that. That's how we did it in the past. And it's not impossible. We're just dreaming here on Between Two Heads. I'm Bubbleman, and this show is brought to you by fucking Octave. Proud sponsors of the Legends of Hash Dinner.
Octave and Meister, the good people at Meister and Octave. Our good friend
also
Davis,
brought to you by Cyanescence mushrooms. You can't get enough of them.
Ooh.
I think you got it.
Brought to you by 710 Pods.
You got to start throwing more of them, because if there's only doing like 1 or 2 a year and they're so small access, like I just think like I
a lot of work.
Hungry for them. Yeah.
1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. It's a lot of work. I'll never forget halfway through it.
It's a lot of work.
Halfway through this one, Addison was like, he's like, dude, I don't understand how you just did this by yourself in a fucking random country, like out of pocket. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
halfway through this one, I hit him up and I
was like, no sponsors.
I'm never doing this again. I was like, I'm never doing this again. That's what I told him.
It's a lot of work.
This is fucking foolish. Like,
it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it. But there's people that are
sneaky because it's sneaky because it is a lot of work that you don't see, because you love it. You're like, oh, I want to do this, but it's fucking. I've already like started in my head coming up with ways to make the approach more efficient and how we can deal with it. And it's really going to be like these series of meetings that create these like teams. And then it's a lot because you have to deploy in a specific way to really be able to handle it. So,
dude, it's a series of side missions that, if executed correctly, lead you to the pot of gold, end of game, final boss, whatever you want to call it, the full melt fucking dinner.
I think
and that brunch.
I love the brunch.
Dinner and brunch.
You know, like in the when we did the hash competition at in Bellingham, like those last 3 at the end, like you're like, man, I'd love to just wake up and decide this is too much. You know what I mean? Like it was.
See, that's how you have to do it.
Yeah.
You got to sleep on.
No
it.
shit.
I think.
How the fuck are you going to decide when
you
you
add that
60
into
dabs in a row?
I know, and that's literally where we were at. So it was. Yeah. No.
Now think of it this way.
Brunch is awesome.
Think of it this way: you're crossing the finish line of all your judging, and you get pancakes. How the fuck do you beat that?
Are you guys noticing that my shirt is dark orange now, but if I shift this way, it shifts to a much lighter orange?
Yeah, it's been the whole
I've
time.
been having a blast with it, dude. It's so trippy. It's like a psychedelic shirt that I can just change the color on.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Well, we have been taking dabs during this process, so that's
awesome.
Yes, as we should.
Thank you so much, man.
Appreciate the shit out of you, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. Definitely won't be the last time.
Fuck yeah. I appreciate the shit out of both of you. Thank you for having me on the show. And yeah, may the full melt bless your bowl sooner than later.
Thank you, brother.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, brother.